I'm gonna lay out. Let's just jump into it. I'm gonna lay out a premise, and I want to see if you guys agree or where we disagree. So,
Disagree.
I tend to view things from a I guess I tend to view things from a sociological, psychological point of view when it comes to different issues we have in society. And I think that's the more helpful way to view things. And I'll explain why.
Perfect.
We all agree, right, that the most important thing is for anyone is like their mind, right? Is how they feel, what they believe, your mind, right?
Sure.
Okay. And it seems like to me, based on a bunch of research studies and just intuition, that who you are personality wise is mostly driven not only by the genes from your parents, but also by the upbringing you had, which normally involves, hopefully, parents and family and, siblings as well. And your grandma, grandpa, just your whole family. So if people are distressed, confused, disoriented, any number of issues on a societal level, I think one of the most important places to start is how people think and feel. And one of the the place to start for where those things got formed is their family. Does you guys agree with that?
Sure. I mean, you got nature and nurture. I don't know what the third element would be unless you're going to bring God into the equation. It would have to be nature and nurture.
I've unfortunately read recently that upbringing and parental influence is nil, which is pretty distressing for a lot of people. But
what do you mean?
It seems to be becoming the norm. The evidence seems to be pointing to that the genes are really running the show, and that your parents may be able to have minor influences on you.
Really?
Not much. Yeah, which is super depressing for a lot of people who are.
What is that based on, though?
Parenting books. Well, I've read it in a couple of different sources. So the most recent one that I read it in, which is going to sound awful because it's Charles Murray's new book.
Oh, he went there.
But I've read it, and that's why I said it. If it was just in the Charles Murray book, I wouldn't mention it. But I've picked it up in multiple sources. Yeah.
So actually, and
go ahead.
I want to get your guys' opinion on this too. This is something I guess I've come to realize with the whole nature versus nurture thing, genes versus environment. I think this isn't even really disputed, but the way I make sense of it is that genes are just environment over time and over generations. Like, in other words, the person you are now and the decisions you make now, let's say that Sitch were to become a world-renowned bodybuilder, okay?
Yes.
Even if his genes
How do you know he's not? Jeez.
Yeah, jeez. What are you, body shaming me?
Even if your genes right now from your parents aren't conducive to that, if you really put in your effort, you could, make some progress there. And your kids, their genes would have some slight better advantage than you did in terms of bodybuilding mass. You get what I'm saying?
Don't think that's true.
That is true though?
No.
Because like if you're working out a lot, you're not changing your DNA structure, right?
You are.
Are you? This is new information to me. I don't know.
It's not your DNA, but you're changing. Essentially, whatever you're encoding in your offspring is somewhat dependent on your life as well. That I've heard that. I'm pretty sure that's true.
So you're talking about psychologically or genetically?
Well, both.
I don't think anything you do. Well, actually, I don't know. They used to say that you don't change your DNA at all, and now they think you do change your DNA, but usually only in a bad way. Like your DNA becomes damaged as you get older, and you're exposed to sun and toxins and all that crap. So I'm not familiar with the idea that if you exercise or do positive things, I'm not aware of the idea of you changing your DNA and making it stronger and then passing on those traits to your children.
Okay, you guys agree that genes change over time, right?
Through natural selection.
The genes do change over time, and like there's telomere shortening that goes on. That is the biological clock of organisms.
Hold on. Your genes change in evolution. The genes don't change in the animal it's alive. It changes, in the process of the offspring when it tears apart and then recombines when you have a child. That's when the mutations are inserted, right?
Yes. But what I'm saying is part of that mutation, is based on your life experiences, though. In other words, genes are just experiences that are encoded into your DNA that have been passed down over a very long period of time. Here's an example. When someone is genetically predisposed to something, let's say, I don't know, some sort of mental impairment, okay, or whatever, not even necessarily impairment. Let's just say autism, which is a little bit of a gray area sometimes.
Right.
There was something I saw that said fathers who have kids at let's say the father is 40 or something, their first child or one of their children rather, are more likely to have autism the older the father is.
Right.
And I was like, that's kind of interesting, because on one level you could say that maybe what's causing that to happen, in other words, it's correlation of, let's say the dad has some slight autism, okay? It would stand to reason that it would take them a little bit longer to socialize very well, have a family, and even settle down and have kids. And so it's well, is that the reason that their kid, is it because they're older that their kid has autism, or is it because they already had it to begin with, which is why they had a kid when they're older? And I guess what I'm trying to say is I think they're both one and the same. It's that probably started, whatever autism gene they had probably started because at some point many, many generations ago, some male child had kids at a late age, which do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, you're saying is, what is the correlation? What is the causation here? I understand that is the chicken and egg situation. I don't know if autism's a good example, because I think, or my understanding of it is, as I said, the older you get, the more damaged your DNA becomes. And since autism is generally thought of as a problem, I assume the thought process behind it is, as your DNA becomes more damaged, it's more likely that you will pass on negative traits, or what are perceived as negative traits by society, to your child. So
I found the book, guys.
Okay.
Found the other book. It's No Two Alike: Human Nature and Human Individuality by Judith Rich Harris. And this author totally made an impression on me because she's an autodidact. She's not an academic. And she just went in and started.
Wait, what's an autodidact? I've never even heard this word.
Self-taught academic.
What are these fancy autodidacts?
Isn't that
I have
great?
to put on
It's
my
almost
smart
better
person
than
glasses
academic.
just to understand you
Jesus.
right now.
An autodidact. Yes. Thank you.
But Judith Rich Harris, she was like a journalist, and she started digging in on just these assumptions in child rearing, and pretty much started overturning them with by just reading different scientific papers and whatnot. So she's the one that basically destroyed the nature assumption, or the nurture assumption, that parents have some influence over their children. Yeah, it's a super interesting book, and she dives into twin studies and all this stuff. Yeah, so it's kind of becoming the norm to think. Unfortunately, as parents, I think maybe this is why people are having less kids, because you have the idea that you're actually going to create a life, right? But really, it's all done after, just as soon as you have the kid.
Doesn't
it's
that
the deck is already shuffled?
Fly in the face of free will a little bit on some level?
It does.
Wait,
How depressing is that?
But I believe in free will.
Okay.
See,
where do you think free will comes from?
Free will exists because I choose to believe that it does. Checkmate, atheist.
Oh, actually, let's back up a second. When you say, because we debate about free will somewhat often on our stream.
Okay.
How are you defining free will? Are you I think there's two definitions of free will. There's, you approach the road and you approach a split in the road, and you can go left or right. And one version of free will says, well, as long as no one is forcing you to go into a direction, simply being presented with the choice and making the choice on your own is free will. Because that's one version. And then but I don't agree with that version. The second version is you approach the split in the road. You can go left or right. But for some reason, because of your past experiences, it's going to it's going to tell you like which direction to go. And so I would argue that you don't really have free will because some experience happened to you that therefore is going to make you think you should go in one direction or the other.
So the way I
experience that you engineered.
So the way I think that's a good way to present the question, and the way I view it is, well, you just said something there, Friended, that kind of is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Is like, so you're right that most of the time people are operating based on their past, or they're operating based on, just like there's muscle memory, there's mental muscle memory, let's say, you know, and people fall into these routines and these expectations, and people are statistics a lot of the time. But I would also say that this kind of goes a little bit metaphysical, but you are not your thoughts. Anybody who's meditated knows this. Like, you can have thoughts arising in your head that you have no control over, but you also can detach yourself from those thoughts. So what is happening there? Like, what is that? That seems to be unexplainable, and that's why consciousness is unexplainable. Because how is it possible that you are not your thoughts?
Well, I don't know. Because if you're meditating, I mean, yeah, you have like sometimes thoughts will pop up into your brain that you don't want to pop up, but still when you're thinking about meditating or not thinking, I would still classify that as your thoughts. That's still your thought process at the moment, right? I mean, I agree that we don't really know what consciousness is.
It's possible to transcend your thought patterns, though. And I would say that being able to do that is a level of self-awareness, which to me is free will. So free will is just like ultimate self-awareness.
I don't know what you mean by transcending your thought process.
Like, in other words, you can break free from your thought process. You can, I think people who change are in part exemplifying this. Now, you might say, well, that's because they had some guidance figure, they had some outside force that caused them to change. Yeah, sure, but I think on a certain level, you can control your own destiny, your own future, and that's because you can be self-aware enough to create your own experiences.
So when you say thought process, are you talking about like habits you form or something?
Habits, just things your mind gravitates towards, desires, anything like that. But I mean, hold on.
Okay.
I don't know. Well, actually, I want you guys to. You could have the last word on that. I don't know. I don't know if we want to go super deep into free will. Is all I'm saying.
Why the fuck not? What else are we gonna do?
Because I want to talk about family a little bit first.
Fuck the family. This is free will. We're going off the rails here.
Okay. Well then,
his position is pretty similar to ours on the free will thing. The position we have on free will, just to lay it out, is most people are just governed by their emotions, governed by their intuitions, and without using your higher reasoning, you're basically acting just on animal instinct, and you don't have free will. You have to cultivate your higher reasoning in order to develop free will. Is that what you're saying?
That is exactly what I'm saying. And I think a lot of people they do operate based on their lower instincts, let's say.
Yeah, you don't need higher reasoning functions.
No.
The animals don't use higher reasoning functions. I guess some do. Some animals are smarter than others. Like dolphins, you can definitely say, okay, well, there's something going on there.
Dogs, maybe. Some dogs. It's
funny. Do dolphins have an elephant and a rider? I have no idea.
Probably. I think.
But anyway.
Go
ahead. No.
Well, okay. So I guess your position is, yeah, I guess it's similar to ours in that people aren't necessarily born with free will, but you can develop free will. Is that your position?
Well, kind of. Like, free will would have to be something you develop. So yes.
Right.
Yeah. But back to the original thing, like this whole conversation started with, I guess it started with the whole genes versus nurture thing, nature versus nurture.
Right.
And if free will exists, as I believe it to exist, then it seems like you do, if in other words, if you do have control over your life and your destiny and your direction, then it also stands to reason that we are not totally bound by our genes. And having positive guidance and influences is a good thing. I mean, like, let's just put aside the Charles Murray book and just let's just
Pulled up the other one for that reason.
well, what I'm saying is let's just operate, because if I were to take that stance, right, and fully buy it, be like, okay, then what's the point of fucking anything? Like,
Right.
then everything doesn't matter. So, and I don't believe that. So I guess we all believe on some level that it's good to have better parents than bad parents, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Better
So
to have money than not money.
Right.
am I wrong to think that the 50% divorce rate in the US and other Western countries, that the black community, who has the worst problem with single mothers, just it's so common to have single mothers and maybe working two jobs, that kind of thing, that can't be, that seems to be a prime issue. How could it not be in shaping the kind of people we have today in society and in the future generations? Do you guys agree on that?
The two-parent thing. Well, I don't necessarily know that it's just like a black community thing. I think
It's not, yeah.
whites have just as much problem with single mothers. It's definitely.
Well, no, I think statistically, it's like a lot higher in a black family.
Is it really? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
they're both going up. Marriage is definitely on the decline, and this is one thing that made me, because that book, the No Two Alike book, really, I guess the genes are playing a huge role, but there's a lot of good statistical information on people with a two-parent household do better, have better outcomes than people in single-parent households. So I wonder if that's an effect of stability, or
It's probably a bunch of things. I mean, it's your parents
go
are going to be less stressed out if they have someone to
Sure,
help share
totally.
the load. Depending on the sex of the child, you need to have a positive role model, presumably, in your life growing up. So, I have a New York Times article open from 2018 about a study that's very related to this, and it says share of children living in low poverty neighborhoods with many fathers present. It says 63% of white kids and only 4% of black kids. And then it says share of children living in high poverty neighborhoods with few fathers present, only 1% of white kids and 66% of black kids.
Wow. That is a pretty big difference.
Wow, that's crazy.
I mean, this study is very interesting because it shows that they kind of look over how much your economic status growing up affects where you end up later in life. And it shows that basically every combination of sex and ethnicity has a positive correlation with the richer you start off, the richer or the more likely it is that you're going to be that level or higher when you get older, with the exception, the only group of people that's not necessarily true for is black men, specifically black men. Black women are actually highly correlated than white women are in terms of the higher they start off as, the more likely they're going to continue along in a high economic status. So there's some very weird specific thing that's happening only to black men specifically in America.
And they're losing economic status. Is that what you're saying? Their trend is down, where everyone else's trend is downward.
Even if they start at a higher economic status, black men always are trending downward, or not trending downward, are more likely to be in a lower economic position than they started from, compared to every other combination of ethnicity and sex. So it's very weird.
Got to be racism.
Well, but that's what's so weird, because if it was just racism, you would assume it would affect black women too.
I think the way I'm interpreting that,
I guess so.
The way I'm interpreting that is it's almost like because single black mothers are so common, I bet what's happening on some level is that that's almost like the role that black daughters are already expecting their life to end up being, so it's like so in other words, it's not that surprising that they would end up in a similar situation to their mom, because that is already the role bestowed upon them. But black men, in other words, it's a self-perpetuating thing. It's like black men, they don't have enough role models in their community of good fathers, perhaps,
or just good male. I mean, doesn't necessarily have to be a father. Yeah.
And I think that also, there's a lot of studies on this too, that's what leads to gangs forming, gang violence, a lot of problems, just lack of a good father figure or whatever, male figure. Yeah.
Sitch, can you drop a link to that article in the chat? People are
sure.
asking. This stuff is not really supposed to talk about this stuff, Glenn.
You want me to put it in?
Why? Wait, is this controversial?
YouTube chat or the Discord chat?
Totally controversial.
Why?
Are you kidding me? Come on.
I'm not even blaming anybody.
This is supposed to be evidence of racism.
Well, yeah. If you say anything other than racism,
this is systemic race. Yeah.
No, but other than just white man bad,
Hold on.
Next thing you know, you're going to say if he says personal responsibility. Oh my God.
No, that's not what I'm saying. In fact, I think. Well,
that's like a right-wing dog whistle.
The thing is, what I'm trying to say is that this doesn't mean racism or systematic racism or historical racism doesn't exist. This is something that could be entirely related based on, I have no idea what exactly is the cause of this, but I would wager that probably something to do with, yes, if you go far back enough, slavery, Jim Crow laws, discrimination might have contributed to this kind of familial breakdown.
You would say that definitely creates the environment that fosters this, whatever the problem is in the first place.
Yes. Yeah. But that is more of like the direct problem when it comes to generation, like this kid growing up. Yeah.
Right.
I think the argument that progressives and SJWs would make is that it's all based on systemic racism, that young black men are incarcerated at an alarming rate, and these children are being raised in fatherless homes because of that incarceration.
Right.
I think that's the argument that they would make. I don't know if it's true or not, because
there's some truth
to the problem that you were talking about earlier, Glink, with the genes versus the nature. It's all chicken and egg shit. It's all like, well, which one is causing the other one, right? Is it the lack of fathers being incarcerated by a racist judicial system is creating the lack of fathers, or is it, there's for some other reason there's just more crime being committed, which then in turn ends up having more people be arrested, which then in turn ends up being fatherless, and then it self-perpetuates, into a cycle.
Well, yeah, regardless, I think the key to breaking that cycle is finding a way to create stronger families, not just for the black community. I mean, we're focusing on the black community, but I think this is very much a white issue too. I mean, I know I have a lot of friends who, a lot of like white American friends who they're divorced or their parents are divorced rather. And I see how it affects them. Like it's sometimes subtle, but like they talk about that period of their life where their parents divorced and how it was just this horrible thing. They went through depression, they went through a suicidal episode. And it's like, that's gotta be scarring for someone, of any race, doesn't matter whether you're white or black. It just happens to be an issue. Yes. That I think, unfortunately, a lot of black families have too, or have more often. But the point is that what is causing this and why is it increasing? And I'll pose, I want to shift gears slightly if you guys don't mind. I think one issue I see is the continual shift away from gender roles. And the gender roles are viewed as this objectively bad, restrictive thing. And women, for example, should be encouraged to do STEM fields. They should do all the stuff that men can do. And to that I say, women can do all the stuff that men can do, and men can do all the stuff that women can do. But generally speaking, since we're talking about genes as well, seems to me that women are more emotionally intelligent, more creative, more open-minded, more selective sexually than men. And men are generally more like assertive, what's the word? Like, decisive.
Violent.
What's that?
Violent.
Sure, aggressive. Men are more goal-oriented. Men are more focused
tribal.
on. Peterson talks about this. Men are more focused on things. Like they want to change the world. Men want to change the world. Okay. Women want to care for someone. They want to care for people. And both are equally important. Like I don't get, one thing I fucking hate is, in a way, the same corporations, because let's be honest, a lot of the times it is corporations pushing, you could be a career woman. What do you think their motive is? They probably want more people in the workforce, more people in their company, more consumers. Women are the highest demographic for being consumers, and I think that's a complete fucking like hoodwink. Because women are being bought and sold and they don't even know it. Both their bodies, their images, and in terms of what their time and attention is spent on. Whereas I think women are also more depressed now, more suicidal now than ever. So are men. So what I'm trying to get to is that inherently, by promoting it's better to be a career woman, it's better to be a consumer, you're inherently downplaying the immense value of being a supportive, loving, caring person, which I think is just as important, just as vital, but different than being a CEO or changing the world or creating a great product.
Well, I just want to quickly go back just to the divorce thing for a second. I don't remember what the exact number is, but I know that living in a single parent household statistically is the biggest factor in showing someone's going to like be in a worse off position in the future, regardless of ethnic background. So just to put a cap on that. But well, this is kind of interesting. I've always looked at this and thought it was a little strange that the feminist movement is sort of inherently sexist. Not all, I guess a certain sects of feminism, but in terms of saying that, like, instead of valuing, being a mother or certain things that are considered stereotypically female, instead of putting equal value on those things as compared to working a job, it seems like a lot of the focus for a lot of feminism has been to sort of say, well, we should just make women, force them into the same roles that men are occupying, as opposed to just celebrating and validating the spaces that women occupy. And I think that sounds like that's what you're saying.
Feminism, in the way that you're talking about, is actually inherently patriarchal in that sense.
Right. Because exactly. Because they're saying that what the patriarchy is doing is inherently more valuable.
And it's not.
Right. It's not. Exactly. But see, that's the problem, is that you can't, just you saying that is automatically labels you as a sexist. Like, just you posing.
I'm destroying people with facts and logic, though. How can they? I don't care what they label me.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying. That's why people can't have.
No,
the
you're right.
conversation.
Yes.
In the first place,
people are afraid to have the conversation. Like James Damore. I actually haven't read. Have you guys both read his thing?
I mean, yeah.
More of the Google memo. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like he was saying something similar, maybe a little bit less, more empirically based, but he got fucking fired from Google.
Right. Well, he was saying that because Google was trying to attract more women into programming roles, and he was saying, well, maybe it's not sexism or malicious sexism, I guess, that is keeping women out of programming roles. It's more that it's just a type of job that's more attractive to men because it's a lot of single person staring at a computer without social contact. It's very goal oriented, blah blah blah. Yes. And then he sort of proposed solutions to make it more team oriented in an effort to attract women, and that was enough to get him labeled as a sexist.
Yeah,
it's fucked.
Unfortunately,
it's totally screwed. But it's difficult because I'm in the position that I think people should obviously be able to do whatever the hell they want to do.
Of course.
But yeah, like based on their gender, they should do whatever they want to. And I'm sort of, on one hand, I'm inclined to agree that, like, well, we shouldn't be promoting men or women to do any specific type of role. Just let them do whatever they want. But the problem is that it's like everything is self-perpetuating. So since I agree with you that there probably is a biological basis for certain male and female behaviors, right? They've done tons of toy studies. There's a million of these toy studies where they take small, like, couple month old, or I guess maybe year-old, like men, boys and girls, and they'll put them in a room with toys, and they'll see which ones that they're more attracted to. And it's like every single time they do this, the boys are generally more attracted to mechanical toys with moving parts, and girls are more attracted to toys that have like faces and things that are more involved in social activity. And they've even done this with chimpanzees and found the exact same result. So yeah, obviously there has to be some biological basis for a lot of these behaviors. But then the problem is, because people are so stupid and people are such assholes, is that like since there is a biological basis for this, that means that there's going to be a majority of men doing X and a majority of women doing Y. And then suddenly, if you have a woman or a man who crosses those boundaries because whatever reason they either socialize in a different way or they don't have that biological influence, when they cross those boundaries, people are like, oh, who is this weirdo doing this thing that's different? And that's kind of the problem, is trying to remove the expectations and bigotry, but still allowing people to just do whatever they want. And I don't know how you can accomplish both of those things.
I think I don't know if this directly accomplishes that, but one thing is like you were saying earlier, when there's a road, and there's two options. Right now, it seems like the option of family, caring for people, being an emotional supportive role is far less pushed, far less promoted, yes, and actually looked down upon. So
yes,
either, I don't expect the people who are promoting the career path thing to just suddenly change their minds, but people need to be at least also promoting just as vehemently the other option.
How do you promote marriage, though? I don't necessarily know. Now, I'm wondering if it's a gene thing, if the reason you're more monogamous, like if your parents managed to stay together, like they imparted the genes to you that would make you more likely to stay together. And maybe it's not a model issue at all. It's just genetically people are more.
Forget about the gene discussion, because if we are to take the gene discussion, then this whole conversation is pointless.
And it's probably more complicated than that. I don't think there's like a gene that makes it more likely for you to stay together. It's just, maybe, if their genes influence behaviors and
mix of genes.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's more likely, I'm assuming it's more likely that there are genes that influence certain types of behavioral personality types. And, generally, if you get a good personality type combination, then those people can stay married together.
Well,
we stopped publicly shaming divorce in a big way. So that had to be some aspect of it.
Right, but that's the problem, is that divorce shouldn't be publicly shamed. But then again,
okay.
Do you think? I don't think it should be publicly shamed.
Well, if you want to encourage marriage, what's the matter with publicly shaming divorcees?
Because there's too many people in like really bad marriages, and if it's publicly shamed, because that was this is the problem with human behavior.
How do you encourage marriage then?
Right, people just move to extremes. They can't sit comfortably in the enlightened, centrist, nuanced position. Okay, so when divorce was publicly shamed, you had all these people, especially usually women, were in terrible relationships that they felt trapped in and they couldn't really get out of. But then when you do the opposite, where you're saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with divorce, people go too far in the other direction. It's suddenly everyone's getting divorced all the time.
Yeah.
Because maybe people aren't being choosy enough when they first get married, or maybe people aren't trying to work out their problems or whatever.
Yes. People are replaceable, and it's viewed that way.
Right.
Yeah. Tinder, dating apps are a great example of this. Not that people use that to get married all the time, of course, but, just think about it. If a girl has 10 guys messaging them, why would they care about the one guy? You know, even if they go on 20 dates in a month, okay? Why would they possibly let's say they have 20 dates in a month, okay? And they get into a relationship and they face a roadblock or a difficulty or disagreement in that relationship. If they have 10 other options waiting for them, they're much more likely to just, all right, I'm moving on, I'm moving up, rather than let's figure this out. Let's work through this. And then, so that creates another issue of like men now feel more worthless in that situation, or more replaceable, let's say, and women feel like more in power. But what it's leading to ultimately is, I don't even think it ultimately leads to women's happiness more so, because I think they just end up more so in a cycle of like, I can't find the right man. I'm so, too many options. There's some sort of law or principle that's viewed this way. I forget what it's called, but the abundance of
when you have too many options, you become paralyzed.
Yes. When you have too many options, you become paralyzed. And that's maybe one reason why like arranged marriages and mail order brides surprisingly have a low divorce rate. not that I'm promoting that necessarily.
Blink is promoting mail order brides, everyone. It's over. Cancel.
But you know what I mean? It's because it's like, well, this is it. This is we're gonna make this work. We're gonna make this work somehow.
Right. Well, presumably someone coming from a culture that's kind of raised them as like divorce isn't an option if you're in that situation.
More conservative cultures are focused on raising kids, so
yeah,
that's a huge part of it as well.
I can't argue against that logic though. Kids are the future. So if you're not raising kids well, then you're focused on short term rather than long term.
Oh, wait a minute. Why? You understand that the reason that you and other people think kids are so important has nothing to do with free will. That's because that's your literal biological imperative. That's coded into your DNA.
Right. That's true.
That's the opposite of free will.
Yeah.
Sure. So then, I'll take you even further. Then, let's even take free will out of the equation to some degree, and say, if that is true. Like instinctively, we all want to reproduce. We all want to have kids. We all want to further life. Then, by going against that, what the fuck even? We're basically anti-life, ultimately.
Anti-life?
Yeah, we're anti what made us, and we're anti-continuing that.
Right.
So it's almost like
I believe,
are you a nihilist or a optimist type thing? I think a lot of people don't want to have kids, for example, and Friend had said this earlier. I don't know if you did, but I know people who have said this, where it's like, I don't even want to bring kids into this world. But if you think about it, that's a very pessimistic viewpoint. It's like, oh, you've already given up. You've already given up on life and the world and humanity, basically, is what you're telling me.
Mm-hmm.
Not in every case, but that's like kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, I think antinatalism is a bad way to view the world, and I agree that's very pessimistic. But it'll be interesting because it seems like we're on a precipice of gene editing, and possibly in 100 or 200 years from now, of them kind of figuring out how to reverse aging. And so that will kind of add a whole nother wrench into this equation, because you're like, well, if people can basically live indefinitely, that kind of changes the value of children, obviously.
Yeah, men and women will cease to even interact with one another. It'll be pointless.
Oh, I could see that.
I don't know. I don't think so, because there's still a huge like biological instinct and pressure to be, I think, in relationships and want to have sex and all that stuff.
Well, robots.
Oh, okay. So you're saying once we have the sex robots, you're saying?
Yeah, it'll be pointless.
Okay. So when we're all immortal and we all have sex robots, so it's so funny because whenever we have Sargon on, this is what he says. This is his dark view of the future. We're all going to be living in like the world in WALL-E. We're all fat people in chairs with our sex robots who just constantly entertain us, and we do nothing and don't produce anything of value.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
Somebody gave me a super chat, and I think it's relevant.
You got a few of them. Is this super chat time?
Yeah.
We have a graphic I don't know if we do our super chats.
Did you get one too? Okay.
No, I'm not.
Let me read this one because I think it's pretty poignant to our discussion. It's
Mhm.
6 pounds from Sebastian. He says Spengler said that a society is falling apart when having offspring becomes a game of pros versus cons. Do you guys know anything about that?
I think having offspring is always a game of pros versus cons.
Yeah. I would say it's the opposite. I would say it's the exact opposite of that. Well, I don't know how they're defining society falling apart, because generally when societies are doing better and are richer, they have less children, right?
Yeah.
And that's the pattern.
Less children, more investment in those children.
But hold on. You're
poor
assuming
societies have more children, less investment in each child.
Right.
Because a couple are going to die or into organized crime.
Then you need them for more manual labor tasks anyway, like farming and stuff.
Sure. They carry you when you're old.
That's also assuming that being richer is necessarily always better.
Oh, sure. That's why I said it depends on how you define society falling apart.
Yes.
Because, obviously there are people that make the argument that, well, we're better as a more agricultural, more to our natural roots society. I mean, I don't agree with that, but people make that argument. So,
like in a way, I think I mean, I guess this is obvious, but like the extreme poverty, right? Not even having enough resources to feed yourself or have a family in the first place is a problem of where our priorities lie with the monetary system or whatever, and economic system. And then on the other extreme of that, the top 1%, the people who, like Elon Musk, okay? He has like, 7 kids out of wedlock or whatever, a lot of kids out of wedlock. He's a billionaire.
I didn't know that. Wow.
And it's like,
I don't think they're all out of wedlock. He's got a wife. He divorced and actually remarried. He's one of those where you divorce your wife and then remarry your ex-wife.
Well, he has kids that are not, let's just say they're not being raised. I don't think all of his kids are being raised by him right now, or in a family unit right now. Or I don't know how they're being raised. But the point is just to say that clearly it seems like for him, the priority is making money, going to Mars, changing the world or whatever, to whatever capacity, versus having kids. And there's a lot of economic incentives that fuel that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if I would exactly blame, capitalism or any economic system, but what we're valuing on either extreme is so misplaced for the actual well-being of people.
Well, here's a question though: say Elon Musk is, I don't know, but say he's unhappy and he doesn't realize it because he's not caring for his children and he's doing all his business crap.
I feel like we're throwing Elon Musk under the bus here because I think
whatever.
he's really good fun.
Well, no. So what I was going to say is, but if Elon Musk, by ignoring his family and his personal happiness, if that's even true, I don't think it's true.
Let's just assume it is, because I'm sure there's examples of that, but I don't know if he's the perfect one.
But him doing his scientific advancements of trying to get to Mars and all this other crap, what if that helps benefit the majority of society overall? Then his sacrifice is worth it for everyone else's children.
Yes and no. Yes, kind of. I think yes, but also only if he's he obviously is an outlier. I guess what I'm saying is what's happening, he's one example, and you're right. Like, in his case, he might be still a net positive to humanity, right? Even if he has 3 kids with no father, hypothetically.
Right.
But the point is that we're going more and more to these extremes. The wealth income inequality, more people are congregating at the bottom, and more of the wealth is congregating at the top.
Yes.
So people are being pushed to these extremes, and it's an issue of, I guess what I'm trying to say is the resources are controlling us rather than the resources serving us, and money is just an accumulation of resources.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Society's not.
Agree.
Yeah. Society's not making. I don't think society is making it attractive for marriage on the kind of scales that it used to make attractive. And I think income inequality has a lot to do with that.
Yes.
Because it used to be if you could get a job and do, you had an income could raise a family, then that made a male a lot more attractive to females willing to take the gender role. But now that both parties have to work, it kind of complicates things in ways that make marriage unattractive, potentially unworkable. I mean, I'm sympathetic to that. I'm always trying to figure out ways that you can, because I'm a believer in marriage. I'm happily married myself. I think you get better outcomes for kids with marriage. You're just in a much stabler situation. A lot of times you're happier. But I am sympathetic because you can't just say, a lot of times conservatives will make videos that say, just get married. Well, it's
not in a
more
vacuum.
complicated than that. Yeah, exactly. Like
Right.
most marriages fall apart over financial issues, which makes sense because it's difficult to be in a relationship where you don't feel like both parties are contributing equally. They don't have to contribute equally down the line. Like everything you do, I exactly do the same thing, but they have to have some semblance of equal value. You may be doing some things differently. You may be taking care of the kids while someone earns money. If those are similarly valued, I think you have a working proposition for marriage. But like in the modern age, a lot of those values are completely out of whack. And I honestly feel sorry for young people because I feel like not only is it a very difficult job market for them, it's a very difficult marriage market as well. So, what do? They go out and protest.
To that point, what you're talking about, I mean, essentially what's happened is men and women went from cooperating to competing because now, like you're saying,
Yes.
it's necessary, or it's becoming necessary for both of them to be in the workplace, and thus they're competing. It just stands to reason, even on just that level, like, well, yeah, how are you going to have long-lasting relationships when your genders are competing in the same space? So
You see this too with celebrities, like the celebrity couples, like one celebrity ends up totally taking off and eclipsing the other one.
Yes.
And they never stay together because it's like they're in a competition. They literally are they're competing in the job market at the same time that they're married. Often doesn't work. How do you stop that? How do you stifle that competition? Elon Musk, I just read Elon Musk's biography, and that's why I recall him being a serious father, like setting aside time to spend with his kids and stuff like that. But when he got married, I remember this in the book. He said to the woman, "I'm the alpha in this relationship. I make the rules."
Alpha Elon.
Which I guess it works. I think that's the woman too that he ended up divorcing and remarrying because things got hectic with SpaceX or Tesla or something. I mean, he was really living on borrowed time. It was during the financial crisis. They needed money and didn't know if they were going to be able to raise it. Like that's hectic on a marriage. Obviously, financial trouble is one of the chief things that destroys marriages, which makes perfect sense. I mean, obviously, if you're struggling financially, it's difficult to devote time and energy to another person. So, am I the only guy here in a serious relationship? What's going on with you guys? Are you how many kids are you going to have? You seem considerably younger than me, Glink. So there's more time for you. You could pump out like 10 or 11.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk a little bit about personal experience because I'll read this. This guy gave me a donation that also adds to the discussion. We'll read that in a second. But actually, after Sitch gives his personal stuff if he wants to. But what I'll say is, yeah, I want to have kids someday. I want to have a family someday, but I think it definitely has to be with the right person, and I have pretty high standards.
Why not today? Why not tomorrow?
Because I have very high standards for what that is. And more to the point, though, I also want to make an impact on the world. I want to have a career. I want to have I don't want to just be a family man right now. You know what I mean? That limits your scope a little bit.
Happy having an impact on the world?
But the thing is, I don't want to be 70. I don't want to be 50. I don't want, maybe not even 40. I might not want to be 40 and have the career as my main thing in life. I might at that point want to have a family. Or not at 40, but
at
you know
40?
what I mean.
You're gonna have kids at 40?
Like 30.
Freeze that sperm.
Sometime in my 30s would be nice. Sometime in my 30s.
Yeah.
But I'm 25. So, what was I
How's the
gonna say?
time, man?
I'll say this.
Autism sets in at
To
30.
this whole point, though, this is what's interesting to me, is my family started out. I have two older brothers. It started out as my dad was the breadwinner of the family. You know, he was making a lot of money, doing really well, and then he had a setback in his career, as most people do. And because of certain financial pressure, my mom sort of had to step up to the plate at that point in our family. And she became the breadwinner. She became the full-time worker in a very valued profession. And I think, you know, that affected, and that's kind of how it is to this day. And I think that affected my family's upbringing somewhat. That affected a lot of things with the family dynamic. My mom wasn't there as much for me and my older brother growing up. There just wasn't enough time. She's busy. And I was thinking, you know, as much as that might have affected my family, I can't even imagine where a family, there isn't even a father. The mother is by default the person earning the money, and they even have to have like a nanny or babysitter most of the time, or something that's someone who's not even in the family raising your kids. And I was thinking, you know, this is probably a very pervasive problem. If even me on some level feels like I've experienced this with my mother being a career woman, which again, she's great and she's very stressed, you know, I'll say that. She's very stressed, and I think women tend to be more stressed in professional environments because they don't do well with just sitting at a computer doing numbers and, oh yeah, let's make sure this client gets this. They do well with caring for people, with being emotional. They should work to their strengths, and that's a good thing. Okay, sorry. Sitch, go for it.
I don't know if I agree with that last part, but
I love that Glink is as sexist as me. This is awesome.
I don't think it's sexist.
Great.
I don't think it's
Well, it is sexist.
Man
You should
or
be proud
woman
of it,
thing.
Glink.
I think it's
Be ashamed of your sexism.
Yeah,
Glink.
just be proud. Be proud. But no, I think it's like a personality type thing. Like I see this in both men and women. People, men and women that are like very type A personality, very driven, and they're always stressed out because unfortunately, what happens in these work situations is when you have that one person who works very hard, everyone else slacks off because they know they can rely on them. So I don't know. That's what I've seen a lot happen with those kinds of people.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen it break down along sex lines in any specific way.
Are women easier to guilt trip in the workplace? It seems like possibly
Maybe. I don't
that's
know.
true. Yeah.
Let me read this donation because I think this guy's adding to the conversation. He says,
You should read them all, man.
Sebastian gave me 5 more pounds. Or was that pounds? What is that? European currency? That's not
Is
pounds.
it an L or an E?
It's an E. It's euros.
Why'd you skip
E is
the?
a euro.
Thank you.
Why'd you skip the take off your shirt, Glink? Why'd you skip that super?
Yeah,
I'll
take
get
your
to
shirt
that.
off, Glenn.
Women choose the best males, and I don't blame them. But that unfortunately leaves a lot of bitter men behind. Not good for societal stability. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I did a video that was an excerpt from the book The Moral Animal, where this guy just laid out like the marriage market and how polygamy actually helps women. That polygamy in polygamous societies is more advantageous for women. And it was just like kind of a red pill moment. I was like, oh my God. And he was making the argument in the book that in the United States, we live under de facto polygyny, because even though we don't have a situation where marrying multiple people is legal, you still have these high status males that are monopolizing all the females because they have these 2-year relationships with a woman. They take like their best reproductive years away from them. They end up like creating a situation where every single guy the woman dates afterwards is compared to like the superstar.
Oh man.
It's like, yeah, it totally destroys things. Yeah.
I didn't even think about that from the male end of things. You're right. Like the super
Yeah.
successful, let's say, Chad males, for lack of a better term, they kind of poison the well. That's not the right term, but you know what I mean. Like they taint the environment
Poison
a
the
little
marriage
bit.
market. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that in societies that accept polygyny, the high status wealthy males, they'll just have like 10, 20 wives. Like in I believe the Middle East, this is commonplace. So you have all of these low status males that are locked out of the marriage market. Why do you think they join like ISIS and shit like that? Because what the fuck are they gonna do?
Yeah. It's not just a religious issue, Sam Harris.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, totally. So
I don't know, because I've heard that point a lot, and it makes sense in terms of like especially with like Tinder and these dating apps, because generally women are getting a lot more requests, not doing
a lot more
anything.
action.
Yeah, a lot more action than the guys are. But it's just weird because that all, like, logically, that all perfectly makes sense. It's just with my own personal experience, I've never experienced this, because like every girl I've ever gone out with or had a long-term relationship with, like all they do is they talk about like all the bad things of their exes. I've never had any like dating relationship with a girl's like, oh, you're so much worse than
likewise
my
for
ex,
me.
my ex was positive in some way or whatever. So I've just never personally experienced it.
You know why?
They don't tell you that.
They're not going to tell you when there's someone better than you.
You would think they would tell you if they're like angry or they're mad or when they break up with you or something. You think it would come out at some point. I'm just saying, because I hear it's not a question of that, because when you hear enough stories about people's exes, it paints a picture of that person, right? So if they keep telling you all these terrible stories about their exes, that's what people. I don't know.
Here's why, Sitch. They want, because women want to have the best man, right? So they're gonna be like, oh, here's all the men who I didn't like. They're almost trying to be like, you need to be better than these guys for sure.
Oh, I see. They're trying to subtly manipulate you. I see. Gotcha.
It's part of the selection process. It's not even manipulation. It's fair game.
I don't know. I just think it's a little too simplistic to look at it. And I mean, I agree that women generally try to date. I think this is very true financially. Women try to date either sideways and up. And I think that's a bigger issue.
Sideways and up?
What do you mean by that?
Like women will date someone who's in their same level on society level, or they'll date someone who's higher status than them. They won't date someone lower status than them.
Right.
Hypergamy.
You know what?
Yeah, where men will date women that are quote unquote lower status.
Men will date anyone.
As long as they're attractive, yeah.
That might actually be a way to combat.
Attractive optional.
Yeah.
That might be a way to slightly combat the competitive issue we're seeing. Because if women weren't so selective, in other words, with men in that regard, then it would perhaps be less of an issue. Your finances would be less of an issue, maybe. Right? Like, it'd be less of a factor.
Sure. Do you think a lot of these Me Too stories are just regretful sex? Do you think it's not really Me Too? It's like,
well, wait, hold on.
guy.
Hold on. Oh, that's like another topic before we get into that for a second. I think part of the problem is that when we're talking about breaking down gender roles and women in the workplace and all these things, that's all fine, but you're not really, as we talked about, you're not really breaking down gender roles, because if you were to completely remove gender roles, you could have a woman could work a high-paying job and she would be totally fine marrying and dating a guy who was a stay-at-home dad, which some people are, but that's not the normative behavior that's accepted by society or by women in general. So it's kind of around this like fucked up situation where maybe you need to like completely get rid of people need to completely abolish all gender roles, or you need to accept that they exist and acknowledge them. You can't do this kind of like in and out thing without really being aware of.
They're not abolishing gender roles. They just want to enact new ones, and new ones that just so happen, I don't think it's a coincidence, to serve corporations better.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's the argument. I've heard this argument before, that the corporations wanted to break down gender roles because they wanted women in the workforce, because more people in the workforce lowers wages, right? That's the argument. Yeah.
I can see that, definitely.
Someone, you got a super chat. Delove Doctor 69 all day. That's great. That's a great screen name.
That's
yeah,
one of our regular
No.
super chat.
I'll read it
Now they're
out.
talking about me. That's why I'm like, we're gonna read this one.
$5 from Delove Doctor 69, Doctor 69 all day. He says, thank you, by the way. He says, somebody in Skylar's chat yesterday said Adam wasn't a lib. I don't know who Skylar is, by the way. Because he complains about SJWs in comic books. Also said Adam was a white Jesse Lee Peterson.
I know that's the hilarious part.
Amazing.
Oh,
Do you
man.
love black people, Glink? I gotta ask. Do you love black people?
I love black people.
There you go.
Good. We all love black people.
Amazing. Jesse Lee Peterson. What is
No.
his thoughts on the current events? I haven't kept up with him.
He's a.
What do you mean?
he's
You
like
did a
total
video. You
Christian.
did a video on it. Oh, what is Jesse Lee Peterson's thoughts?
Jesse Lee Peterson.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Well, it
Jesse
probably
Lee
wouldn't be hard to
Peterson.
predict, right?
Yeah.
He has a thing that he always does that I think is kind of brilliant, and I don't necessarily know why, but he constantly asks people that come on, have you forgiven your father? Just like under the assumption that your father, like everybody's father,
He's getting straight to the heart of the issue is what he's doing.
has like done something to them that shouldn't be forgiven, or rather should be forgiven, but
Isn't.
Right.
I mean, they've done something that needs forgiving. I don't know.
That is pretty common.
It seems brilliant. Yeah.
It's kind of smart.
I don't know. Have you forgiven your father, Glink? I feel compelled
that's
to
a good.
ask.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. It's a little bit personal, but I'm going to try to keep it as vague as possible. But so my father, who I definitely love, I appreciate, I've really looked up to growing up. I've realized in a recent, like in my last year or two, that my father has certain shortcomings. Like in a way, I think my father didn't instill enough discipline in us, and didn't fully fulfill the father figure role as well as he could have. And it's certain ways it's definitely obvious. Now, that being said, I totally don't view it as blame, because I realize he's way better than what percentage of fathers nowadays who could be drug addicts, alcoholics, abusive, divorced. But I do think that, again, like that made me think, if my dad, who I can already view ways that he's somewhat flawed and that affected me growing up, I can't even imagine what the average father in America, how much they negatively impacted their kids.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
I have a very similar experience with my dad. Like, obviously, we're flawed human beings. We're all flawed. But I can't imagine going to my dad and going, I forgive you, because he'd be like, what the fuck did I do?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Sorry, Jesse Lee Peterson. That's the one fly in the ointment of that. Like, I forgive him personally, but I'm not going to go to him and tell him.
Well, does he? I don't think Jesse Lee Peterson means have you like gone up to your father?
Oh, he does. Because he says,
really?
have you told him? Yeah. The next question is, have you told him? Have you forgiven? Yeah, I forgave him. Have you told him? Like,
I mean, isn't it more important for you to like release any energies you personally have about resentment towards your parents? You know,
forgiveness is important. It is.
Yes,
Yeah, you gotta. I know so many people who their lives are fucked up because they've latched onto someone that they can't forgive. Like, even feminism, in some ways, it's like this invisible patriarchy that's to blame, and I'm never gonna forgive the patriarchy.
Did you forgive your ex? That's a good question to ask sometimes too for women, I think.
Totally. Yeah.
Right.
What makes marriage work is forgiveness, like constantly.
Yes.
Like, you constantly have snags and you gotta forgive. I think a lot of relationships don't last because, I mean, we live in a totally not forgiving culture.
Yes. Absolutely.
Terrible.
Forgiveness is not a part of the conversation at all.
Ever. Yes. Yeah. I think that's one of the, and people give me a hard time. I don't know if you're a religious or an atheist or a theist or whatever. I'm an atheist, but I'm like a pro-religion atheist. And one of the reasons why I believe Christianity is like a good thing is because Christianity basically teaches forgiveness in the same way that Christmas, which has become a secular holiday now, teaches generosity. Like, it's good to have once a year that we meditate on generosity, like how good generosity is for society. You know, we all watch Christmas movies, and Christmas has kind of become
Commodified.
You know, well, there's that aspect of it, which I don't like that as much as the next person doesn't like that. It's not like turning Christmas from generosity to greed, I think, is a bad way to go. But I mean, if you focus on the good aspects of it, the generosity aspects of it, you know, the Christmas movies, that kind of thing, it's good to meditate on that kind of stuff. We need some sort of secular equivalent for forgiveness. If everyone's going to become secular and we're going to abandon Christianity, which, you know, maybe there's a case to be made that that's a good thing, we still need that forgiveness component. And without that forgiveness component in society, like, we're fucked. We're totally fucked. Where do we get it?
If you don't mind, I want to read a couple super chats here.
Yeah, go ahead. Read them all, man.
So we have $10 from Lucas. Thank you so much, Lucas, for the $10. I appreciate that. He says, great stream. What are Adam and Sitch's thoughts on the OnlyFans question and the corporate commodification of interpersonal relationships? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
What's the only, like, specifically, what's the OnlyFans?
So I think this guy maybe has been following some of my streams, or at least my video, which is that so OnlyFans, I mean, you guys know what the site is and how it works.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't want to focus too much on just the site, but the idea of,
let's explain it just in case there's someone listening that
sure,
know.
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So OnlyFans,
like Adam. I'm sorry, what?
OnlyFans is like,
I got like 10 thoughts lined up on OnlyFans. Are you kidding me? Don't tell my wife.
It's like Instagram or Twitter. It's just like a social media platform, essentially. But the way it works is there's all these models. They don't have to just be female, but they're predominantly female models who will post anything from nudes to provocative pictures of themselves to video clips of straight up porn, anything that's adult content. They post, and in order to see these posts, you have to subscribe to them, which costs money, ranging anywhere from like $5 to $20 a month. And in doing so, not only do you get access to their page, but a certain subset, in fact, a growing number, I think, of people on there, they also message you. They will, kind of give some interaction to you in the DMs as a subscriber. So effectively,
have you done that?
What's that?
Have you done? Because I saw you made a video where you were like looking into this culture.
Yes.
Where have you done any? Is it like the girlfriend experience? What are these DMs going back and forth?
So I did. I did subscribe to a few accounts, if nothing else for the visuals of my video, but also just to get a little glimpse of it. And it was mostly the girls I interviewed, so it was very professional. It wasn't like I'm.
Of course, very professional. Yes.
Did you keep some of them after the journalistic?
No, I canceled my subscriptions. But, what was I gonna say? I gotta check my credit card to actually make sure that that's still the case.
Yeah, you all of a sudden he's thinking, I think I
Gotta make sure.
So that's a good question. The experience. What I noticed, I could tell most of the time, I think like 90% of the messages, and part of this is because I wasn't typing messages to any of these girls, I assume, but it's like mass messages. It's like, but they seem like they're personal. Like, hey, I'm kind of bored on Sunday. Here's a picture of my tits, something like that. Or it's like, hey, what are you up to? I'm horny. Not exactly like that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
weird.
Yes, very weird. But based on talking to these girls, at least the ones I interviewed, it seems like they do have personal messages with people, but it starts out that way to kind of entice you to respond, So, and I wasn't responding, to be fair. Mm-hmm. So that I don't actually know the full experience, but I assume it's like, it's just like you get attention, you get messages from these girls. And I think that's the main reason that the majority of people, men rather, use the site. So when this guy's saying the commodification of interpersonal relationships, in other words, people aren't just using this for porn. And why would they? They can just have access to unlimited porn for free. people are using this and paying for this because on some level they like that attention. You know, maybe not the mass impersonal attention, but when they form a personal dialogue with these models, that is part of a relationship in real life. You know, you have a communication with someone that you're very attracted to and you're interested in. So my whole stance, just to try to sum it up quickly about that, is this is a bad thing for society because we are commodifying something that should be very valuable to people, which is interpersonal connection on a romantic level, especially. And it's the end result of this is that the men who subscribe to these end up being more lonely, because this doesn't actually amount to relationships, you know, and they're more isolated, more lonely, and they're more perpetuating the problems that got them there in the first place. And this can be tied together with any kind of technology, by the way. So, but this is one area where it's especially prominent and destructive, I think. So just to like to explain what I mean by that is, if a guy is lonely, is not good with women, is the type of person that's more likely to use OnlyFans, okay? And by doing that, they are further essentially digging a hole for themselves in terms of at least their real life prospects are going to continue suffering, and they're going to be more detached from reality. So that's why I'm against it. And then also on the other side of that, real quick, women, I think there's negative effects for them too. Even if they're making a lot of money, I think the way that they view themselves when they're constantly taking pictures, constantly perpetuating these superficial fake relationships with men who are paying for them, is that they view themselves as a commodity, as an object, and their sexuality as that, which is also unhealthy. So that's the only thing.
You want to go?
It's interesting because like people have been talking about parasocial relationships in terms of streamers a lot, like where some streamers and they'll kind of act as a replacement friend group for people. You know, it's kind of like you listen to Red Letter Media or a bunch of other people talking, and it's kind of like, oh, this is like my fake friend group. So it's kind of interesting. I never thought about this in terms of porn and the OnlyFans. It's kind of the same exact situation. It's like, oh, I have like an internet girlfriend that's sort of satisfying this emotional need I have. And well, I don't have a problem with people paying for porn. I agree that the bigger problem is people spending time and energy and money cultivating a relationship that it doesn't exist. And as you said, it's counterproductive. It's kind of, unfortunately, people probably won't like this comparison. It's kind of like video games in terms of, like, a lot of times someone can spend hours of their life playing a video game and you're getting better at some game. And unless you're making money playing that game, you're just basically wasting your time. You're spending all this time and energy getting better at something that's not really going to, I mean, it's giving you emotional gratification at the time, but it's not building towards something grander in the future. It's not helping you down the road. And it's the same, I think what you're saying is, and I agree with, it's the same thing with these kind of fake relationships. Like, yeah, maybe it feels good at the time, you're satisfying some emotional need at the time, but you're basically just throwing your money and energy into a pit, and it's just going to hurt you in the long run. But I have no idea how you would solve that problem whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't know that I can add much to it. I keep thinking, like, what would my 14-year-old brain think just in inhabiting this environment that exists now? It's tangentially related to prostitution, I would say.
It is, yeah.
But it doesn't have any kind of the social stigma that prostitution has. So it's kind of just this weird nebulous zone where I feel like it could be as damaging as prostitution, but without any of the.
I think it could
stigma.
be more damaging than prostitution.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
exactly.
I think. Well, I mean, I'm sure.
Less.
Right. I'm sure with prostitution, there's always going to be some individuals that engage in prostitution that view the prostitute as like their fake girlfriend. Like, you know, people have call girls and all that stuff. But I would assume, I could be completely wrong. I've never hung out with prostitutes. I've never bought a prostitute or whatever. But I would assume most people kind of view it more as transactional sex. Or they could, like, it's not like they view it as like a fake long-term relationship that they're building towards. I think that's more of the problem with some of the parasocial aspects with OnlyFans and things of that nature.
I'm going to read another donation that will shift gears a little bit, I think, with the discussion. Nunya Biz gave me $5. Thank you, Nunya. Our parents allowed production to be sold to China, college to become intersectional churches, and let what their parents built rot. No forgiveness given. Oh, man,
Wow.
that is so the prototypical, like, millennial, fuck the boomers, they ruined everything mentality.
Yep. There's a great economist that me and Adam like called Mark Blythe, and he has a video. I'm trying to see what is it called. He has a video called "Global Trumpism and the Future of the Global Economy," and to me, he really kind of provides the best explanation of kind of the shift from the economy from the 70s to the 80s, where we started shipping jobs overseas and everything sort of kind of shifted away from being worker focused. So I would recommend everyone check that out if they want to know why things are the way they are economically.
I have a tough time blaming this on our parents because it seems like so much of it is our leaders, for one, and just kind of the churn of the way society works, the interactions over time. Like nobody stepped up and said, like, in one go, we're going to move all of our production to China. Like that just happens over time. And even the intersectional creep in schools and stuff like that. I mean, all just slight variations over time. So it's difficult for me to drop the no forgiveness hammer, because while who exactly do you blame for that? We do need to turn the ship around, and I actually think we're making progress. Although there's an argument to be made that in recent days with all the protesting and whatnot, are we actually making progress? I'm not sure that we are. Like a month ago, I might have said we were on the verge of busting this social justice, which I do think is like a replacement religion for Christianity. But now I don't know. We have like all of our politicians are like bending a knee to looters, and where are we at with all this stuff?
Well, that's not a fair.
Bending a knee to looters? You don't like that?
I don't think that's a fair description.
Coming out strong here. I saw Nancy Pelosi take a knee for looters.
Yeah, they're not taking a knee. Yeah, I know you're trolling. They're not taking a knee.
They're taking a looter knee. They're taking a looter knee.
Yeah, no politician is taking a knee for looters. They're taking a knee for the idea of systemic racism against black people.
Okay.
So I want to respond to that thing as well, and I mean, I agree with you, Friended. I mean, I think we all agree that playing the blame game isn't productive. And also, more to the point, playing the blame game is exactly what the intersectional churches that you have disdain for are doing. You're just doing it on a different level. And I understand why, but I think for us to progress at all, the only way, like truly progress, I don't mean like the progressive way of progressing. I mean, is we have to understand why these things happened. It's not that you forget the past and just like, no, just pull yourself up from your bootstraps and move on. It's like, no, we need to understand why we got here. We need to understand why the boomers acted the way they did or whatever, and why millennials are acting the way they are and what forces set that into motion. But putting blame isn't a solution, and it also just creates more division. So I think understanding, and this is why I have discussions rather than debates. Not that I'm against debates in principle, but in general, I think having understanding and bringing people together is, if there was any benefit of the whole Corona thing, I think it was that on some level, if not at least immediately, people were forced to be brought together or forced to face the reality that they have no one to be together with. And I think that's the way forward, is understanding a generation's plight, a race's plight, a economic class's plight, but not blaming one group or another, because I don't think that leads to anything productive.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, as you said, the intersectional woke aspect of society is too focused on shackling you down with all the transgressions that have been heaped upon you and your gender and your race for all of history. And you're never going to move forward if you have all these things weighing you down. You just got to, at one point, you got to take the chains off and say, I'm going to be my own man and get that free will that we were talking about and move forward.
Yes. But that can only be done through understanding. Like, just saying you have to move forward is not enough. That's where I think conservatives have it wrong sometimes.
I kind of disagree. I understand. Like, I agree with you logically. In order to fix a problem, you should have to know. You want to know what the problem is, right?
Yeah.
But that's like when we talk about systemic change. But I think an individual, it's almost too complicated to really understand.
That's true too. Yeah.
You sit because when people block out blaming the boomers, it's so much more complicated than that. Because it's like, well, why were the boomers the way they are? Well, it's because the Vietnam War, and you had a generation where basically, I mean, you had the greatest generation, you know, our grandparents, or depending on your age, maybe not my grandparents, who basically grew up in a society where they got through the Great Depression, and then they were like the heroes of World War II, where you had this very clear Nazis were the bad guys, obviously, and America was the good guys. And you had this very easy black and white picture of the world. And then suddenly you have the boomers grow up in this time period where there's all this unrest because people are like, well, black people should be fucking treated the same as white people, and we're really racist. So now suddenly people are starting to view their society as maybe American society isn't so black and white. You know, no pun intended. Yeah. Maybe American society does have problems. And then that's compounded with the Vietnam War, where lots of boomers felt like my parents are lying to me and sending me to the other side of the planet to fucking die in a jungle. So this is a huge destruction of people's faith in the system that happened for boomers. So it's too easy. It's not, or I guess it's too simplistic to just be like, oh, the boomers fucked everything up. Because then on top of that, it's like, well, everything got fucked up with Reagan, really. That's when the economy in the 80s started shifting to globalization. So, and I'm not sure what the voting statistics are in terms of boomers versus the greatest generation voting for Reagan. So I agree with you when it comes to people who want to change the system. They should have to know, they should not have to know, but it's helpful to know, obviously, what causes the problem. But on an individual level, if you're just like an individual Joe Schmo in your life, maybe it's better to not concern yourself with the whys and just concern yourself with moving forward and releasing the emotions that are tying you down.
Can I respond to something in the chat?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
B. Athenia says a group of white guys saying systemic racism doesn't exist. I'm not saying. I have a problem with the idea of systemic racism because it's not really clearly defined, and our system is supposed to be designed to be not racist. That's why the Lady Justice has a blindfold on, because the system itself is supposed to be not racist. But I believe that racism exists, and I believe that, like, I can't imagine being born in a society as a minority. Like, you have every right to this nation as everyone else does. I have a very unique experience because, I grew up in Southern California, and for a year I actually went to a Catholic school where I was one of 3 white children in an all-black Catholic school. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, that experience shaped a lot of my understanding of racism because, dude, I was surrounded by people who looked nothing like me, acted nothing like me, and basically struggled to fit in. So I always took that experience with me when I moved to Northern California, and I was among a bunch of white kids. I always noticed that there's a couple black kids who felt exactly like me when I was in that other school. So I don't necessarily, that to me, when people talk about white privilege, which I don't like the term white privilege at all, I understand that it is a privilege to live in, to be the majority. And it is more of it's more detrimental or more, we try to legislate the problem away, but I don't know that you can legislate that problem away, which is difficult. And also the policing issue, like blacks are often a victim of the stereotype of the black criminal, which obviously we have to work against. So I do like those are problems that need to be solved, but I don't see people. I agree with Glink. I see people playing the blame game, which is they're using, oftentimes our leaders are using that strategy to gain power for themselves instead of eventually solving the problem. They build these systems where their power is perpetuated. Like this blame game fuels their power, which eliminates their desire to even solve the problem or even entertaining ways to solve the problem. I would like it if our leaders were working on solving these problems, but I feel like most of it is just superficial virtue signaling, which is why I'm citing the taking the knee thing. Like, I don't want you to fucking take a knee. I want you to fix the problem.
I'll just say to that, I'm not even white, so that doesn't even none of that.
None
Of that
you're
applies.
not? Oh, hold on, we have the immunity idol here.
I don't know.
I guess I'm the only white guy here, but I don't know.
I'm a person of shadow, so I find that.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much agree with what you're saying, and also that's the whole problem I have with. Again, like, it's understanding versus blame, and one of us gets us somewhere. It's good to understand, if you want to use the term white privilege, it's good to understand what that means and how that plays out. But it's another thing to say, well, because of that, now we need like revenge against white people. Now white people have to bow down. Now white people no. You can't fight racism with more racism. That's not how it works. Yeah. You're just perpetuating racism. I agree that racism is bad and it's a problem. And historically, it's been used against black people a lot. And even present day, I'm sure there's plenty of instances you can point to where that's still very present. But the point is that you don't fight racism with more racism. Because let's say some hypothetical point in the future, okay, some minority group holds all the power, okay, then what? Do white people have the right to now be the victims, and then thus is there minority privilege at that point, and now white people can rise up? Like, are we just going to keep continuing the cycle forever?
Yeah.
Right. Well, and also I think this goes into kind of why there's been this shift away from equality to equity, because it seemed like growing up when people talked about fighting racism, it was all about equality. It was all, give everyone of every racial background the opportunity, level the playing field, give everyone the opportunity to succeed. And I think that's obviously good, and that's where we should be striving for. The problem is, as we talked about earlier in the stream, is that there could be cultural aspects that are damaging, or Scott Adams calls cultural gravity. There could be a cultural gravity that is damaging to people.
I love
any culture, it has nothing to do with ethnicity. Any culture around lower economic status is always going to be damaging, right? Because it's the same thing for poor white people. Because if it wasn't, if you lived in a culture that was primarily around a lower income group, but the culture promoted growth, then that culture would cease to exist, because everyone would eventually move out of the lower income situation as they got older and got a better job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem is that you have, as we talked about earlier, you have like the black community faced all these problems because of systemic racism, because literally they were, their ancestors were enslaved. And then even when they were not enslaved, they were discriminated against for so long that you've done all this damage to the community. You have like all this psychic damage that has been like imparted to the black community in America. But the problem is that we're not smart enough to know how to fix that. We don't have the computer that tells us all the answers. Like, as I talked about earlier in the stream, they look at the data and they say, oh, for some reason, we don't understand why black women are able to succeed in some situations where black men are not. We don't know the answer to the situation. So, and since culture and groups of people take so long to change, that's the unfortunate reality. It just takes very long for cultures and groups of people to progress and change, even if it's not their fault. The problem is this shift to equity is that there's too many people that think they can force force equality. They can not force. They can force equity. They can force equal outcomes on everyone because they think, well, if you just pump money into a situation, you can just culturally engineer your way out of the problem. But I don't think we can because I don't think people are smart enough to know what the answers to the problems are. No, if we knew, if someone could say, here's the answer to the problem, okay, it's these factors, and we can change that through cultural engineering, maybe we could give it a shot. But they don't. No one knows the answers. And the problem is it's so politicized because you have, if you're on the left, they want to say, oh, well, the answer for everything is because of racism. Everyone's just racist. White people are so racist. Country's so racist. This is the problem. And if you're on the right, it's like, well, it's because people just don't pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. They just need to be more motivated, self-motivated. And it's like,
but that's not deep enough.
No one knows the fucking answer to this. So I don't see how we can cultural engineer our way out of it without understanding what the problem is.
Yeah. Friended?
Well, let's fix it today. No, we're not going to do that. Sorry, guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and to go back to what Adam was saying about taking the knee, this kind of pissed me off because I saw Jordan Peele had retweeted. Someone took the picture of the parents from Get Out.
Oh, I
don't know
saw,
if you've seen
you
it.
tweet. I saw you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
They took the picture of the parents from Get Out and they put those weird shawls that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are wearing. Those weird like African shawls. I don't know why the fuck they're wearing it. I agree it was bad optics. They're wearing these like African looking shawls. And they photoshopped those on the white parents from Get Out and then said like, this is Democrats today. And then Jordan Peele retweeted that and he was like, this. And I was like, fuck Jordan Peele. Okay. And the reason Jordan Peele is because he doesn't know. And a lot of the fucking woke leftists don't know because they don't follow actual politics. They just talk about anti-capitalism and communism all day. Was that the Democrats in the House actually did just pass they created and introduced a pretty large police reform bill. Now, if Jordan Peele has a problem with those specific things, he can talk about that and say, well, maybe this doesn't go far enough. But he doesn't. He just says, he just sees them doing the photo op and he just says, they're just doing a photo op. Nothing ever changes. And this is the problem because there was this great video of this woman yelling at the protesters saying, all you're doing is like destroying your community and all you're doing is coming out here and yelling. Like, why aren't you fucking voting? If you want real change, go out and fucking vote. That's the way you're going to enact change.
I want to play devil's advocate to that real quick or whatever you want to call it. Which is, and I think I understand this as well. The problem with the whole just get out and vote mentality is like, I think that actually might be a reason why people are protesting right now because they look at 2020 and they see we have Joe Biden, okay, and Donald Trump, who they've been, whether it's accurate or not, a lot of minorities just dislike Trump, whether it's for good reasons or not. So that's already like a very bad option in their minds. And Biden, who's enthusiastic about Biden, right? At most, he's like
actually. Supposedly,
it just. But I feel like a lot of young people who are the ones protesting, a lot of the younger people, they do not care for Biden. They definitely don't want Trump. And to them, it's like, fuck this, burn the whole system down. I don't want to choose between the lesser of two evils again and again.
You're right. That is what they say. And that is how they feel. But here's the thing: why is Joe Biden the Democrat candidate that was chosen?
Because they didn't vote in the primary.
Because they didn't fucking vote in the primary. That's
they
why.
all wanted Bernie, but they didn't show up. And vote for him.
It's like if you look at the breakdown for the primaries, it was like yes, the younger the person was, the more likely they were to vote for Bernie Sanders, and the older they were, the more likely they were to vote for Biden. And the problem, this is what pissed me off about this. Is what triggers me about all this stuff. Okay, people complain. They say politics in this country. Okay, it only serves to satisfy one group of people, old white people. And I'm like, you're right. It does. And you know why?
They're the ones that vote.
They're the ones that go out and vote because they don't got shit to do. They're old. They're like, whatever. I don't got anything to do. I'm going to go vote. And that's the problem. They vote overwhelmingly. So obviously politicians are going to cater to their whims. And the problem with Bernie Sanders was that, he motivated and energized young people, but he still only motivated and energized a small percentage of young people who probably were going to go out and vote anyway. The overwhelming majority of young people didn't fucking go out and vote in the primary, and then Bernie loses, and then they complain about it, and I'm like, well, that's democracy. I don't know what to tell you.
Right. Yeah. It's almost a problem of
the schools are fucked up.
But here's the thing. Well, here's what I wonder actually about that, because what I was initially going to say is, so one problem is that, you know, this younger generation likes to complain a lot. They're like throwing temper tantrums. They want to burn everything down, but they're not willing to take any responsibility at the ballot box. That's one way to view it. But the other way to view it is this: what if the same people who are very vocal, who are protesting, who are very active and against all this stuff and don't like the two options, let's just suppose for a second that they are the ones who voted, and maybe they even voted for Bernie or whoever.
Sure.
I think that would also mean, though, that there's an even larger swath of young people who are just completely disengaged. Like, in other words,
yes,
they don't even care at all, and they don't vote, and they might not even be vocal about what they think or don't think, and they're just giving up in a sense. I think that's also true.
Right. Well, and see, and it's a problem because all the things we've been talking about, all the problems we've been talking about, they're all self-perpetuating, because there is a huge amount of young people that are totally not motivated to vote for whatever reason. I'm sure there's many reasons for why that is. But then when you have so many people, especially on the internet nowadays, saying nothing matters, the system is corrupt, its system is broken. Well, you're just disincentivizing people to want to vote in the first place. You're completely removing any motivation for them to participate in the system in the first place.
Yeah, maybe I'm guilty of that, because I feel like I have that mentality.
You're totally guilty.
You're totally guilty.
Really?
No, I don't know. I'm just joking.
Because here's my rationale.
Not to vote? Don't tell people not to vote. They should vote. Like, one of the reasons I think schools are so fucked up is because young people can't vote. Like, it's a joke on our live streams all the time that I'm saying 12-year-olds should vote, but nothing would fix the schools faster than if you gave the people who were inside that institution the ability to change it. Like,
right, exactly.
The people who society serves the people who show up and vote. They do. Like, the people in power want to keep their power, and they know in order to keep their power, they have to keep their constituents happy. Like, it's very basic.
Power is very cynical. Yeah, they're only going to do what they need to do.
Wait, are you actually saying that kids should be able to vote, or you're just saying that as a thought experiment?
No, I'm saying 12-year. Yes, I would encourage 12, like us being as a society, letting 12-year-olds vote. I think one of the reasons why young people.
I don't think.
No fucking way. Listen,
why?
With age, because here's why.
Why?
Voting.
I'm totally sidetracked.
Voting is a very important decision, and important decisions are best made with wisdom, not on impulse. And young people tend to act on impulse, not on wisdom.
It depends upon how you conceptualize the system of voting. I conceptualize voting as a poll of how society is doing. And if you're having a poll, you want the largest number of people to contribute to that poll. You're conceptualizing voting as strategically deciding on policies for the future.
Yes.
Okay, I don't think that works, because there's a law of unintended consequences. We don't know if those future policies are going to work out, and we always have the next election as the opportunity to repeal those policies because they didn't work out. So if you're in a situation where a policy didn't necessarily work out, don't you want to ask the largest number of people whether or not that policy worked out? Or are you just going to ask the small number of people that are already biased towards the policy because they're the ones that implemented it to begin with? Like, if you're conceptualizing voting as like strategically mapping the future, that's basically the same argument for planned economies. Like, why wouldn't you only have the smartest people vote?
Okay, that's actually not a completely accurate. That's not accurate to my view of voting, actually. I guess I view voting as a responsibility, especially in America. It's your responsibility to be politically informed and engaged on some level. It doesn't have to be your life. It doesn't have to be in every conversation, but you have to know what's going on. It's your responsibility as a citizen, okay? That's what I believe. And I think kids until a certain age should not bear that responsibility.
Well, don't kids have the best understanding of what's going on in the school that they're in? Like,
But they
don't they
have
have a better
yes.
understanding than the parents?
They do, but they also have the least amount of perspective.
Yes, I agree. I don't think they do have the best understanding. Because
Okay.
what are they? Because they have a different goal. Their goal isn't to be educated and
Right.
be productive in the future. Their goal is to have fun, right? They have a different perspective.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if you can trust a 12-year-old judgment on how school should be run.
Definitely. I agree with Sitch.
You're not necessarily asking them how school should be run. You're asking them funding issues. Does the school need more money?
Okay.
School's always
Adam, if you have kids,
You
hypothetically.
just hold on. Say that again. That was music to my ears. What did you just say?
Always, everything in life needs more money.
School always needs more money.
Always
Say
more money.
say it one more time. It's music to
School
my ears.
always needs more money, Adam.
How
Okay.
does school get more money?
Well, unfortunately, they have to be in a better neighborhood so they get more tax revenue.
It's based on voting.
Yeah, but no, this is the problem with
So
all these
who's
issues.
who's gonna vote for more? Who's
I
gonna
think
vote
what
for
Sitch
more
is
money in
saying-
school aside from the students.
No, yeah, but the
reason
but
why
here's the issue.
different-
Those kids aren't paying tax money, Adam. Maybe they shouldn't get the vote because they're not paying into taxes. So obviously,
you're
that's
gonna
easy for them. It's easy for them to vote.
That-
to give up some money.
41% of people are negative on taxes, so those people shouldn't
Okay,
be allowed to vote.
I guess that's fair. I guess that's
Adam,
fair.
Okay. What?
if you had kids, would you let them have any say on your financial situation as a family?
I'd let them vote, for heaven's sake. Jesus.
You would let them
Like,
vote on
vote.
how you spend your money.
These people are acting like voting is carrying a gun or something. Jesus Christ. Like, you would also, if you started people voting younger, you would make it habitual. They would be better citizens. Like, when people are 18, they're out trying to get laid. They don't care about
Okay,
voting.
Do
Whenever
your
we've argued
kids,
about-
Adam, do your hypothetical future kids have equal say in how you spend your money to your say in how you spend your money?
Well, societal money and personal money are a different thing. I
Why?
would say.
Why are they different things?
Well, I mean, it is a little bit, but
It is, but
Look,
what I'm
that-
trying to say is on a societal level, kids shouldn't be deciding how to spend other people's money when they have no responsibility and no perspective of where that money comes from and what it's doing and what it's for.
right.
So then we should just defund the schools then. Like, why do we even have public school?
I don't know. Maybe that's a good question, but that doesn't
Well, I
change
don't
the
know what that
principle.
has to do with what he said. But look, whenever we've had this argument, because we always argue about this. Okay, I think Adam is like the lone person on the 12-year-olds should vote front.
Dude,
of
the
this one.
12-year-olds love Adam. They love
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. So we've come to a compromise. We came to a compromise. Whenever this gets argued, we say, okay, how about 12-year-olds only get to vote for president and nothing else, just to habitualize, the voting.
They're just going to vote
in
for
this.
whatever their
Not gonna
parents
help-
say.
It's not going to help the problem of the defunded schools.
It's
You
not
said
gonna,
it.
It's not going. The kids voting isn't gonna help schools either.
Money. The people that vote, listen, Social Security is not going anywhere. Why?
Right, because all the old people vote.
Because old people vote. Exactly. No one's going to get rid of their Social Security because they vote.
Why do you think kids are going to vote for
Getting
more money?
defunded.
Kids aren't going to
constantly
wait. Kids
funded.
are going to spend.
Kids
They're not going to vote
can't
for
vote.
more money. Kids aren't going to vote for more money going to their schools necessarily, Adam. They don't like
Gonna
school.
vote for more.
Don't like
Are you
school.
kidding?
Wait, I got a donation
Okay.
that I think maybe adds a little new factor to this conversation. Shinso Beam gave me $5. Thank you, Shinso, for the $5. I appreciate that. I have a compromise. If you're 12, but pay at least $1,000 in taxes, you can vote. I think I agree with that.
Well, you don't
guys
want 12 girls working, so I don't know. I agree with-
Yeah, exactly.
That's
you guys
true.
are terrible.
Well, maybe they're doing like an online enterprise. I don't know. They're boy genius.
Let the 12-year-olds vote.
Yeah. Okay.
You guys are oppressive. I don't see why you want to oppress people.
No, it doesn't. I don't think it solves the problem.
It's
you
not
think it
oppression. Adam, here's where I think we fundamentally disagree. You view education as the problem for people not being raised well, and I view the family as the problem for not being raised well. And no matter how much funding you put into education, I don't think you're going to solve the problem of people not being well raised unless you solve the family problem. Is that fair, or do you think?
Well, who knows, if kids actually voted, they might vote for like pro-marriage stuff. I'm sure 12-year-olds are affected by divorce
Oh, yeah.
a lot more than adults are.
Okay, so
Like, why would you want them voting on those issues?
they're not going to conceptualize things this way, Adam. When you were 12,
Not everyone's a genius like you, okay?
did you understand
you
when you were 12, like the
don't
problems in
understand.
your life?
Voting, all you have to understand is my parents got divorced and it fucked up my life. What more do you have to understand than that?
That's
I'm
dangerous.
voting for pro-marriage policies.
That's so dangerous because that's so much of our problems in society right now is because people on the left and the right, they go, oh, something's wrong with our society. They don't know what's wrong with it. They just say something's wrong with our society, and then they fall back on whatever their pre-existing ideas and their gut intuitions and their moral intuitions are to explain why society is wrong. But usually those people don't fucking know and thus are incorrect, and thus the changes they want implemented make things worse or they don't help the problems.
And you have the repeal.
What about school council?
Like the whole idea of the next election.
My friend
want to repeal. What about Trump? They want to repeal him next election.
I know someone in this chat who's like, I think he's 14, and he brought up a good point. Maybe he said, isn't the entire point of school council to habitualize voting?
Well, but the problem with that is usually school councils have zero power, so no one gives a fuck anyway, right?
Well, but it's like,
can vote, they'll give them more power.
Give school councils more power. Maybe that's the solution.
How much power do you think a school council will have if 12-year-olds can vote? All of a sudden, he's like, I have all these voters asking me what they should vote for.
Here's my perfect example of this. Where I live, people looked at suspension numbers and they said, oh, we found that non-white people are suspended at higher rates than white people, right? So they automatically say, well, that must be because of racism, right? So then we have a politician runs on the idea that they should get rid of suspension for schools where I live because it's racist, and they win, and they do. But guess what happened? Okay, that was a very stupid analysis of the problem. You see, the real reason that non-white people were getting suspended more was because there was a lot more non-white kids living in poor school districts, and poor school districts don't have the money for indoor suspension and other punishment mechanisms. And that's why they were often relying on outdoor suspension. So when you remove the option of outdoor suspension, but you don't provide the funding for indoor suspension, all these classrooms all devolve into fucking chaos because there's no punishment system. There's nothing can do with these unruly children. So basically where I live, one by one, schools, predominantly in non-white areas that were in lower income situations, all start closing down. Because now without suspension, they all just start getting Fs. And then all those students just get shuffled from one school to another school. And all of a sudden, all the schools in my district start getting lower and lower and lower and dragged down. All because some fucking idiots got rid of outdoor suspension without understanding the underlying cause. Okay.
Hey, who would have a better understanding of that underlying cause? The bureaucrat who came up with the law or the actual students?
Well,
Tell me that.
Teachers, because they're in the classroom, so they would understand the problem.
And the students, correct?
Not necessarily, because
you're saying the students that participate in this.
Hold on,
no, because
I actually have a middle ground
wouldn't
solution.
actually understand the problem.
Students in the higher income areas aren't going to have any conceptualization of what's wrong with the schools in the lower income situations.
I actually have
well, the lower income situation would actually vote for more funding, and it would solve the problem that way.
I have an idea.
Go ahead.
So to that guy's point earlier, I actually think there's some legitimacy to that, because I remember distinctly there would be these student council elections in my school, okay? And when I was like in 9th grade, 10th grade, whatever, I was always like, man, this is so fucking stupid. Why would I ever care? They have no actual power. They're not going to make any changes.
There you go. Exactly.
But like, if they could actually maybe they affect the school lunches. Maybe they can change certain small policies or even big ones in the school. I would be so much more inclined to vote. It's like, okay, now I actually care what this person's policy is or what they think.
Vote for president. Are you kidding me?
No, but what I'm saying is, what if the solution, in other words, if school councils actually had more power, that would encourage me to vote in school, which then would encourage me to vote in the real world.
Yeah. No, I agree with that completely. That would be a great solution. The problem is
My side, you're just angry.
I don't ever see them giving the student council any power, because any real power would revolve around funding.
That's true.
And the adults are not going to want to allow these children to allocate funds for the school.
Okay, what if they set aside this X amount of money is to be allocated by it's like a budget for school.
That'd be
councils.
fantastic. But it's not going to happen. But it would be fantastic. I like it. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, if we're going to put more money into education, I think that would be a good place to put it.
Maybe. It would definitely be worth trying in one of these hippy-dippy California districts that would do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Why are you destroying my state too?
What do you mean destroying your state? You're the one that wants the 12-year-olds to have the power at.
It would be great. Do it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I got
exactly.
2 more super chats. One of them is $5 Canadian from Italian Cause Walk. Thank you. Couldn't adults literally just buy votes then? $1,000 a vote, just pay for someone else, $1,000 tax, and get another vote? Yes, in the hypothetical 12-year-olds have to pay $1,000 in taxes, that would probably be an issue.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Jonger Bongers.
Right and left.
Jonger Bongers has given me $5. Thank you, Jonger. Appreciate that. You're supporting the stream. You're supporting Adam. You're supporting Sitch indirectly. Very indirectly. Public schools need to go. Homeschooling should be more of a thing because it is family taught, and we should go back to where only landowners can vote. That's a pretty extreme position.
I totally. Why do you think? Why do you think land? I'm telling you, the people who vote have the power, and if only landowners can vote, only landowners have the power.
Right.
Oh.
Well, so the homeschool is very interesting because I think most studies show that people that are homeschooled tend to do better in all tests. They tend to do better in terms of getting careers and jobs. But I would assume, based on no stats, based on my own gut intuition, that people that are generally homeschooled would have more difficult times learning to socialize with other people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I thought you were going to say that they were wealthier families because they actually
Well,
had a parent
I
that could
assume that's true too. I assume that's true.
The benefit of public schooling is socializing, but I think even that, I mean, obviously there's certain, learning certain things in school is valuable too. But that, by the way, I think is this is a little bit of a bigger issue, but going back to the whole technology thing, kids at a younger and younger age are on smartphones now, and there's actual data showing. So we looked at the data, okay, and young females, like preteens, their rates of suicide and depression, which is like super scary that young preteens would be, is going way up, and a lot of it is correlated with their use of Instagram and social media, which is just detaching them from reality.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Jonathan Haidt made a great analogy in his last book, The Coddling of the American Mind, where he talked about the effect of social media on young girls. And he made this analogy that if you put a smartphone into every 14-year-old girl's pocket, it would be the equivalent of putting a loaded handgun into the pocket of every 14-year-old boy.
Wow.
That's not going to lead to good outcomes because boys are physically aggressive. Girls are socially aggressive, and social media is just like a handgun for them to just attack one another.
Right.
And nobody realizes that, but that's why the rates
That's
of
such a great
suicide are going up in
comparison.
young girls. Because, imagine if you knew every single. I mean, we were rough as kids. I can't imagine some of the crazy screwballs I hung out with having a loaded gun.
Yeah.
So, it's scary to think of, but that's such a great analogy because people they think social media is harmless, and it's definitely not.
Have you guys seen Parasite?
Oh yeah. Parasite's great.
So it's a great movie. My favorite part of the movie, spoilers by the way, mute me for the next minute if you don't want to hear. My favorite part of the movie, I'll snap my finger when we're done with the spoilers if you want to. My favorite part of the movie is the part where the housekeeper has the phone and it's literally being used in place of a gun effectively to hold the family hostage. And I was like, this is fucking hilarious, brilliant, and such a commentary on truly how powerful social media is. And I was kind of hoping the movie would go further down that direction, but yeah, I just thought that to your point, like it is in a way more powerful than a phone than a gun in terms of long-term impacts, ramifications, and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
There's another interesting thing too that they studied the difference between boys and girls. I notice people in the chat are talking about it. I find this fascinating. Boys, they fight physically, but the bad feelings don't linger. Like a lot of times, boys will get in fights and they'll end up becoming better friends than before the fight.
Yeah.
Women, it's completely opposite, and I think this really affects people in the workplace. Women hold grudges much more than men do. When women fight, like the bad feelings last. And I mean, if you know this, like this is so helpful. Just like being married, like if I get in a fight with my wife, I know like I can be over it in 5 minutes, like no problem. But I understand like that feeling lingers for her in the same way that it was for me in like the midst of the fight. So just knowing that helps you interact, I think, across genders.
Right.
I'm going to read this one from Nicodemus77. Thank you for the $5, Nicodemus. Appreciate that. Isn't the frontal lobe development important for decision making in the first place? I think he is referring to children voting.
Yeah.
What do you say to that, Adam?
I'm separating two ways of conceptualizing voting. I really am. Like I completely agree with you. Like people make better decisions the more experience that they have. So the trade-off that you're making is you are like polling a wide number of people's experience. So if you have a school and the school is working for 90% of the people, then that's probably a school that's working. If the school is failing for 90% of the people, that's probably a school that's failing. But you don't really know until you poll 100% of the people. And that's my idea on the voting. You're asking people who are actually involved, who have local knowledge, local specific knowledge of the situation. Sitch's example is a perfect example. People who didn't have local knowledge of the situation made this policy that actually made everything worse. So if those people in the system were actually voting, I think they would have been able to sense that they would have immediately seen that policy would fail for obvious reasons. And you don't have to be uber genius Albert Einstein to know these things. You just have to have local information. Have I won you over? I see you. Like,
me?
I think, yeah. I think you're.
I mean, I see your point.
Intellectually, you're considering it.
Yeah, but the problem I have with it though is that, like, I could see. In other words, it's like big picture versus small picture, and you're right. Having that firsthand experience from those kids is very valuable. I almost feel like there should be, I want to reconcile this by saying the experience and the problems and the complaints and the desires of the kids should be somehow funneled into people who can vote. Because even if you give the kids the power to vote, I think kids are oftentimes so stupid and uninformed, not stupid, but you know what I mean? That's a bad way to put it, but you know what I mean? Kids,
detached.
They're so
stupid and uninformed works. I mean,
kids have a hard time verbalizing and conceptualizing.
In other words, I think kids would even have a hard time voting in their best interests. Like they would have a hard time even understanding what their best interests are, despite knowing what problems they have, if that makes sense. So it's
I mean, adults can't even do that. So what chance do kids have?
So we should funnel. We should understand. Like maybe there should be legitimately a representative council of kids that their what they say, their complaints are given very serious consideration to the school and how the school runs its policies. I do think that's the better solution. I don't think kids should just blanketly be able to vote, because I think that creates other problems. But I see your point, and it's a good one. It's just that we need to funnel that in a way that works.
The resources always go where the votes go, where the votes are. I don't think a lot of people understand that or realize that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Adam, I'm sure you could investigate this. I'm sure there's some school somewhere that's done exactly what Glink suggested, where they have some, all the kids vote and they actually create real change in the school, and you can see how that turned out. If it turned out well, if it turned out shitty, if nothing really mattered.
Yeah, okay. We'll look into that. We'll dig in.
Evan says, my sister is 12 and she wanted to vote for Mike Bloomberg because he had the most ads.
There you go. See,
Bloomberg is going to buy the kids' vote.
Whenever Adam brings up the 12-year-old voting, everyone just explodes. No one agrees with him.
It's fun. It's fun just to think of. Most of the reason that I do it is because it is interesting to conceptualize voting in this different way. Like I don't think people conceptualize voting correctly. Like if you have set up a society where only the smart people vote, like that's a planned economy. That's
well, you want a direct democracy, it sounds like.
Well, in a democracy, the people who have the majorities are the ones who have power. Like we're lucky that we have all these overlapping constituencies.
We don't live in a democracy.
We live in a republic. Yeah, but
yeah.
Adam,
should we
abolish? Adam, should we abolish the electoral college, Adam?
That's a tricky one. Well, we don't.
It's a good point.
We don't know. Listen, so let's think of my conceptualization of voting to look at this problem. A lot of times people will say, and this is a very valid criticism of what I'm saying here, they say, listen, once a policy is enacted, it's impossible to get that policy taken away.
Right.
So if the policy is bad, I mean, prohibition is the ultimate example of this. We made alcohol illegal and it turned out to be a nightmare. All these unintended consequences made people's lives a living hell. And it didn't really solve the problem of alcohol. It just created a black market. So we took that back. We repealed that amendment. That was a lot of work. But I don't know, maybe if we could structure something like repealing the electoral college for a specific period of time, it would automatically come back into effect unless we voted to repeal it for good. Maybe that's a way to deal with that problem. Because there could be all these unintended consequences. You understand what I'm saying?
Right. Well, I mean, that's why I was saying it's always better if you can test these things on a small scale before you enact these massive, nationwide changes. So I'm sure there's been some schools somewhere that have done the kind of changes you're talking about that you can look at and see if it was successful or not.
Well, I'm talking specifically with the electoral college, because what are you saying? Are you saying get rid of the electoral?
To the kids voting thing, because that's why I brought up the electoral college in the first place.
Well, the thing with the electoral college is I worry that we're going to repeal it. We're going to get all these unintended consequences, and we'll never be able to put it back into place. So that's why I'm saying maybe if we repeal it in this way, where we're going to repeal it for the next 2 elections, and then if after that we would have to have another vote on it for a like complete repeal of it, and people would be able to say,
because what if they repeal the electoral college for 2 elections and it turns out like, oh, that totally helps one side. It totally helps the Democrats and they win both elections. And then when the third one vote comes around, obviously it's just going to be a completely partisan issue. It's not going to be like a logical issue or a rational issue.
The electoral college is such a clusterfuck. Like what?
But that's the problem that you were talking about. That's why a lot of times when changes are enacted, it can be almost impossible to get rid of them, is because it doesn't really usually have anything to do with what's better for society. It's who is it helping, Who's
but that's my whole argument with voting.
Sure.
If you don't want to help the 12-year-olds, then don't let them vote. I would like to help them.
Jongers Bongers has given me $2. Thank you, Jongers. Problem today is that parents aren't parenting. I agree.
I agree.
But I guess the problem is, why aren't they? And also, how would we even change that? I think one thing with with this whole family thing, one problem that I see with it is a lack of existential belief and a lack of belief in anything that's intrinsic and intrinsically valuable. And religion served a role of filling that with whatever negatives there were with religion, which there were many, especially, religion at the end of the day was a human, human run kind of system, institution. And with that comes a lot of problems of power, problems of corruption. But one thing that the whole point of religion was to instill the power of belief. And I think belief is the core of spirituality, of religion, and is the most useful thing. Because if you believe, everyone operates based on beliefs. They don't operate based on data. Nobody operates rationally. That's another thing. We all think we operate rationally. And that's why I kind of recently have strayed away from data and stuff and statistics and, like facts and logic, to own the liberals. Not because those aren't valuable or those don't have a place. They do, but also in order to actually give direction, you need some sort of existential belief, I think. And if your existential belief, which seems to be very common, is that nothing ultimately matters, it's no wonder you're going to have, every single one of your life decisions, whether you think it or not, is informed by what you believe. So right. I think it comes down to existential beliefs. If you think that everything matters, life has intrinsic value, and it's good, then you will think having kids is intrinsically good. You think maintaining a family is intrinsically good. It guides you in a lot of things. Whereas if you think nothing matters, it's like, well, it's the problem of options. Because a lot of moral relativists will say, oh, but let people decide for themselves. Okay, but we've seen with like every single thing that when people are left to their own devices, they're lost, they're confused, they don't know which direction to take, and things become chaotic rather than orderly. So that's my argument for having an existential belief system, something like a religion or spirituality to guide you rather than nothing at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely agree in terms of as America becomes more secular, which I'm personally in favor of, there needs to be something that fills the gap. There needs to be some unifying principle or theory or banner that everyone can kind of rally under. And I would hope that it could be. Well, not atheism. Atheism isn't a unifying banner. It's just not believing something. So, I would hope ideally it would be sort of this American ideal of the American dream, would be what I would make the argument that would be the perfect thing to kind of replace.
So America's our new religion?
Well, but you kind of need something, right? You need something to fill that gap.
Yeah.
I think in America, the American dream, a belief in hard work, right, and social mobility, that seems like a good thing.
But even America's founding principles is based itself off of that's, I think, why they had a separation of church and state in terms of policies and all that, but right. They definitely intentionally tied "In God We Trust." God gave us these rights because the whole idea of America is also based on, existential belief.
Do you believe? Okay. Do you believe in natural rights prescriptively or descriptively, or neither?
So in other words, do our rights come from government or from God? I believe they come from God.
Okay, so okay.
Oh, wow.
So you're taking the
believer
that they come from God.
I'm a believer in a God, yes, but not necessarily a believer in every word of the Bible. What'd you say, Sitch?
Okay, no. So I guess the question's moot then if you're a theist. So
were you raised Christian?
Yeah, I went to a Lutheran school. Armenians are also historically like the first Christian country, very orthodox, very traditionally religious. But again, wow. I think the trap with religion and institutionalized religion is falling into a specific set of doctrine and just blindly believing anything. I believe, if you really want to get into that, like when I look at nature, when I look at creation, I look at the universe, I look at design, creation, and order. Nature is all order. It's not just random chaos, okay? So if there's order in nature, there's something intrinsic there. There's some sort of design. And if there's some sort of design, there's some sort of higher power, higher intelligence going on. Now, whether that's Allah or God or whatever name you want to put on it, I don't know. Maybe it's the universal consciousness that all of our consciousness derives from. But that's kind of where my mind is at with existential beliefs.
So Because I mean, because it's very funny because on our stream, because I do believe in God, but Adam doesn't, and yet usually I take the secular position, and he takes
Yeah,
the
totally.
That's
the pro-religious
I'm an
position.
atheist for Jesus right here.
Yeah, I'm like a theist for atheism or something. I don't know what I am, but but do you believe in like objective morality, that there's a moral system that God has like dictated that we should all follow? Because I mean, I agree with you in terms of, as you said earlier, the problem with a lot of religions is that it's, man maintained, obviously, and religion's going to act the same way politics does, in that there's going to be people using religion for their own political power, and it's very difficult to kind of pick that apart from whatever is supposedly spiritual and divine.
I think morality. So, yes, I do believe in objective morality, but if you want to go to the very baseline level, I don't think it's very hard to convince someone that such a thing is good to believe in, and here's why.
Well, yeah, but that's different than the question of whether it exists or not.
I don't think it is different.
Okay,
I think belief trumps everything.
Yeah, interesting.
So you're taking the Jordan Peterson truth.
Yes, he's
okay.
Belief is everything.
The Sam Harris truth debate. I got you. Okay.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, because I'm totally on the Sam Harris side. That I agree with you, obviously, and this is where I think the natural rights question comes in. I agree with you that it's helpful for society and for people to believe that there's some God-given rights that we all agree are good. That's helpful to motivate people to act a certain way. But I don't agree necessarily that that's true, that that's really the way it is.
It's metaphorically true. It's not scientifically true.
Yes.
I don't know. You just make the distinction.
Isn't Peterson's point? I think I remember his point was truth is only something is only true as far as it's good or something.
As far as it helps you survive and
yeah. I think I tend to agree with that point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, he says that's why he says something is true enough, which I have a big problem with that. For whatever reason, I'm very focused on the idea that there needs to be some objective reality that we can all agree upon and understand, because we're so mired in our.
We can though.
Well, no, because if you take the position that objective truth doesn't really matter, right? Or it doesn't exist, and you take the position that it's all whatever is valuable, I think that's kind of a dangerous road to walk.
Here's a path I go down with this is it kind of comes down to whether you value life or not. Because if you value life, there seems to be some objective goodness to life. It all comes down to pro versus not versus anti-life to me, right?
I don't agree, because like if we lived in a Viking culture, right? The subjective moral truth claim would be, well, it's our God-given rights from our Norse gods to, pillage and rape and die in battle, right?
No. I'm saying life on a grand scale. Like, so in other words, those Vikings, if they're raping and pillaging and they're creating suffering.
Sure.
I don't think that that's conducive to the goodness of life overall.
No, I agree with you, but I'm saying that's your subjective opinion. That's not an objective fact that exists in nature anywhere.
Well, no, it does exist in nature, because life is always has an instinct to reproduce and continue living. And
right,
flourish.
but wait a minute. At the expense of what? The expense of dying. The entire system of evolution is based around killing off the weak, right? Mm-hmm. So that the strong may survive and propagate. And that's not really a moral system that most people in modern times kind of hold up as.
I think that's true until you get to a certain level of intelligence, though, because
and then it's all of a sudden it's not about nature; it's about us, right?
Right. So it's up to us to decide how. In other words, are you pro? Okay, let's simple it down to this then. At least, are you pro humanity advancing, flourishing, and being what's the word? Living in abundance, let's say.
Sure, of course.
Or are you pro creating more suffering, or at least indifferent to more suffering being created? Holy shit, that's a big cat. And yeah.
I mean, I think part of the problem is very few people are going to say they're pro-suffering, right? It's that everyone has a different opinion on what progress looks like. Like our view of progress is going to look very different than a fundamental Islamic extremist view of progress. They're not viewing it in terms of, I want to create suffering in the world. They're viewing it in the same way that they want to create the maximum good in the world. It's just that has a very different look to it. Right?
Good for them, right?
I'm trying to think how I can contend with what you're saying. I feel like I have an answer. I mean, it just seems, look, at a very fundamental level, operating under objective truth will naturally guide people. Now, maybe...
Sure, of course.
Thought experiment for a second. Like, maybe what that objective truth is important, but operating under an objective truth will guide us somewhere, will take us somewhere. But operating under no objective truth puts us in chaos, right?
Yeah, definitely. It can. But as you said, it depends what the objective truth is, because that can lead you down the road to destruction.
That's true. Yeah, but I think people who just say there is no objective truth and nothing matters, they've given up on trying to find a solution both for their own life. I think more importantly, your own life, because it's easier for me to figure out individually what's right than it is for me to figure out societally what's right.
Right, but people can say that there's no objective morality or there's no objective truth and still think and believe that, well, humans create the value in their life, and that's what you should be striving for towards our society, and the types of human values that we have dictated are, better, like the maximum well-being for as many people as possible. You can have all that without believing in objective morality or objective truth.
Here's my argument for God.
Why does this topic fascinate you so much, Sitch?
I've never heard Glink's position on it. So
I give you my argument for God real quick? Why believing in God is...
Sure, go ahead.
I mean, okay.
I believe in God. I'm probably not going to disagree.
Okay, right. But here's like an objective reason for why it's better, let's say, to believe in God. Is because when you have this more relative stance of like humans create their own objective value system or morality, the problem is, at the end of the day, what becomes your God, what becomes your highest goal, is either another person or resources. Okay, so like people either worship money or they worship other people. This is government becomes God to people, money becomes God, resources. Now, if you suppose that there is an omnipotent, flawless creator,
right,
that's inconceivable to us, that always wants you to do better and be a more perfect human based on, let's say, certain criteria. We can get into that later. But just the idea of there being a God above all existence and all men and all government and all money, then you are going to strive. It's like shooting for the stars instead of the moon, kind of. It's like then you are going to, maybe that's not the best analogy, but you are going to strive then. Your rights don't come from government. They don't come from money. And therefore, when there's injustice in the world carried out by governments or because of money, you don't let that stop you from reaching true justice, true goodness for humans, because your goodness comes from something that no other human and no other thing can possibly be better than. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. But it's the same problem is kind of like the just ruler problem, because what you're saying is the system you're putting forward would be, I guess, objectively better in terms of societal advancement and people's personal happiness, as long as whatever their view of God is something that we conceptualize right now as being positive and helpful. Right?
Yeah.
But the same faith, the same blind faith in that God, or maybe not blind faith, but the same power of conviction and power of faith in that God that is the benefit is also the detriment, because then as soon as that definition of the God changes to be something destructive or bad, then they're going to also follow it. So that's why I agreed with you when I said, yes, a belief in God and a belief in objective truth is going to help you as an individual feel more fulfilled in your life, 100%.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better towards building a society that maximizes the most good for the most amount of people.
Okay, and then to the point, so I agree with that, and I guess my answer to that in my own life has been, I don't find what is good or not good necessarily based on some sort of doctrine written by man. I find it by, it's going to sound tacky, but I swear it's kind of valuable, looking deep inside my own conscious experience, and also looking at in some ways nature and all of creation, and seeing, not that I'm a complete naturalist, in the sense that, like, I don't think we should just do whatever is evolutionarily beneficial or whatever, but in the sense that working in harmony with creation, with nature, and working in harmony with how we feel, because I think feelings are derived from some sort of conscious, higher state of consciousness, or is closer to some sort of higher state of consciousness rather than just computational thinking. Going based on those things and finding the truth within those things, again, like, okay, here's a good example, because I'm going to bring it back down to earth real quick. I think, objectively speaking, everybody can feel love, and everybody has this intense feeling when they fall in love, has this intense, like, and I mean real love. I don't just mean like lust. I mean, like, you really care for someone so deeply, and you really love them, and all of the feelings associated with that. I think that has intrinsic value to it. And in a way, by being intrinsically valuable, it serves as a guide. Like, creating more love is a good recipe for a direction to go in. Whereas something like OnlyFans, let's say, can cheapen that experience, because it's like you can simulate parts of affection and parts of what you might consider love, but really you're just paying money for that feeling, and therefore the feeling is just worth as much as you buying a burger for $5. So what I'm saying is that certain things, based on if we really understand ourselves and how we feel, have intrinsically more value to us. You eating a burger is not the same as you falling in love with your wife and truly loving her.
Sure, but okay, I don't.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I haven't fully figured out everything yet. Just give me some time, but that's where I'm at in terms of finding an objective direction that is positive.
Right. Well, but the problem, I guess, my issue with that is, I mean, I agree with you in terms of the love situation, but like the cynical response would be, well, you're just looking towards your own biased, moral intuitions that you were probably born with, or were, afflicted upon you versus your environment. And you're just basing that as your system of morality. And you're kind of saying, well, we intuitively know something and therefore it must be true, when that's only because you live in a society that has sort of dictated kind of the moral system that we agree is good at the moment.
Okay,
right?
I disagree, because I think there is a universal consciousness, and I don't think consciousness is dictated by society. And
okay, so you think that there's extra information coming from God that is kind of,
yes,
that you can channel when you're meditating or introspecting, that is coming.
That is the whole free will versus non-free will part. It's like free will. Yes, there you go.
Okay, no, because I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you in the terms of, whenever we argue free will on stream, I always say, I don't believe free will exists in nature. I believe if free will does exist, it would have to come from God. So I do agree with you from that angle. I just, usually when I try to conceptualize things and argue things, I try to argue them in secular terms, because I don't think for me, it's not beneficial or persuasive to argue things in theistic terms, because the way that I view it is that you can't prove God exists, and you can't really convince someone that God exists. It's just sort of like a personal experience that people either have or they don't have.
Adam?
What's up, guys?
So that's how I feel about it. But.
Yeah, I get you. I think we have the same conclusion, but maybe different approaches for. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm saying I understand. We don't have the same conclusion, because even though I believe in God, I don't believe in objective morality. But I have a very different conceptualization of God than most people do. But I do completely. I understand your framework. That's what I'm trying. I was just trying to understand where
as
your
long
framework.
As you understand that, that's fair.
Yes, sure. So,
Adam, what do you, maybe you don't even want to wait. You don't want to wait on this, or do you want to?
We argue this on stream all the time, and it just. Well, I believe in objective morality from a scientific perspective.
No, we stop it. Oh no, you promised, Adam. You promised.
I won't go into it. We'll do it.
No. I'm not saying you won't go into it. Okay, Adam, when he says objective morality, he doesn't mean objective morality.
So when a lot of people argue objective morality, really what they mean is universal morality, which is completely different.
No. You're the one that's different. You have to accept it. You're the one that's using different definitions. Even usually when people talk about objective morality, they mean philosophically. And when they mean that there's some moral system that exists in nature that is separate from human beings. Okay.
Universal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what people generally mean when they say objective morality.
To bring things back down to earth, what do you guys think? I think you guys certainly should host a live podcast in the Seattle Autonomous Zone.
Oh my God, I would love to do that. That'd be crazy.
Oh my God. What was the name of it? I already forgot. The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
What do you guys think about that? Just seems like it's not going to be maintained at all, right? Like it's just
No, it's going to break down, obviously.
Is it like a block big? It looks like really small.
I'm not sure how long it is. I mean, it's a good... I guess it'll be a good social experiment meme, because then all the anarchists, we can just point to that and say, see, it failed. But then they'll say, well, no, it only failed because the government came in and, forced it to fail. So I guess it won't really solve anything, but it's dumb. I mean, do you have any deep thoughts on this?
I want to go there. I want to be a citizen of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, but, I don't know how what process works.
I mean, I have a very cynical view of anarchism and this whole idea of flattening the hierarchies, because I think that hierarchical structure is so ingrained in our evolution, and that you can't. Maybe one day when we have the super abundance and we have the Star Trek replicators, then we can have flattened hierarchies. But until then, I think we're so programmed biologically towards hierarchies, and all you're doing is creating power vacuums, which will be filled by bad actors in these situations.
We are team animals, and teams by their very nature are hierarchical. You have leaders and the followers, so you're never going to avoid that. It's crazy that people think that you can. It's funny because the people who think that you can often are like leaders of that anarchist movement.
They're literally existing as the refutation of the thing they believe.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Right. I got $5 from Nicodemus77. Thank you, Nicodemus. It's funny that this whole thing started in AutoZone and is ending in AutoZone.
There you go. Exactly. It's all coming back to us. It's like a circle. Like any good story, it's a circle.
Yeah. There is, but to your guys' point, in case the chat doesn't know, I think you guys are also talking about the whole Pareto distribution and how not even just in human civilization, like things completely outside of humans, the same level of hierarchies. I mean, Peterson talks about that too. The same level of hierarchies exists in like matter distributed throughout the universe, like animal kingdoms, every form of, every way you can measure that, I think. What do you guys know about the 80-20 like principle when it comes to that? Like, do you think that applies to the whole men-women dating scene type thing?
I don't know if that exact number does, but yeah, I agree with that and the Pareto distribution. I mean, it's just that's part of the whole thing that the anarchists and I think the anti-capitalists don't understand is just the more you have, generally, the more it's easier for you to acquire more. Once you have whatever it is, it's easier for you to generally get more of it.
Yeah.
And, that's not just true of money. This is Jordan Peterson always brings this up. It's not just true of money. It's true of like mass of planets. It's true
Yes.
of like the amount of light trees get, from the sun. It just seems to be kind of like a trick of math that exists in nature, in the universe.
Our
So I wouldn't be
placement in the
surprised if it
simulation.
exists in relationships as well.
Are there
Oh, yeah,
of you streaming,
totally.
by the way?
No.
What's that?
None of you are streaming? Because I was going to, if one of you wanted to start streaming, I was going to, host your stream. Not host, but I was going to, direct everyone there.
Oh, well, we're not streaming at the moment. But you can put our
no.
streaming link in the description, I guess.
We stream every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Yeah.
Yes.
Could one of you put your link
If you're
in the
gonna
chat?
Sure. If you're gonna stream, you go ahead, Sitch. I'll let you take care of the link. If you're gonna stream, are you starting to stream more regularly? Like if you stream on a regular schedule, you'll do better, I think. In the whole Pareto distribution of things.
Yeah, it's a good point.
People
I'm
get
not
used
sure.
to
I kind
seeing
of
it at the same.
I'm kind of going with the flow right now. I'm a very spontaneous. I don't plan things too much, but I try to do once a
noticed
week
we
for now.
Planned this, I think, a week ago, and you're like, "Oh, that's in 20 minutes." I'm like, "Are we
Yeah.
on today?" And you're like, "Oh, that's 20 minutes."
Well, I thought, I forgot what time I set, but hey, it worked out.
It worked out perfectly.
I think we had a good discussion,
Yeah, no.
and I think now we all know that 12-year-olds should vote.
That's the main takeaway from this conversation.
You gotta have things that spark the imagination to get people thinking. So
Childlike sense of wonder.
12-year-olds voting tends to spark people's imagination. They like to argue about that a lot.
I don't think
where's
it
one that
sparks their
we get-
imagination. I think it triggers them. I think that's the word you're looking for.
What do you think a spark is?
Oh, okay.
I think the spark is the divine spark.
The Allspark from Transformers.
Yeah.
What do you think God thinks of 12-year-olds voting?
I think I don't think God thinks. I think God is the source of all thought.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. I think God is in favor of 12-year-olds voting. That's why you start to go through puberty when you're 12. See, it's
Sitch.
the natural sign.
You said something to me in person, actually, at VidCon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
That's
I can,
right, guys. Guys, Glink is one of the few people that knows what I look like.
I don't know if I can share it here. Do you know what I'm talking
You can
about?
share. I assume is something spiritual. Yeah, you can share if you want.
I think it's a great idea. I don't know if I believe it, but you said that you had this, let's just say you had this very spiritual experience. I don't know how much I can reveal, but you had this very spiritual experience in which you felt like you met God or something, and you realized what God is just all people. I don't know if you said all life or all people are different versions of God trying to live out life in every possible different way to experience life for one, and also to not be lonely, because God is lonely without life. Is that
So
accurate?
I never said I don't think I said I met God. I think you're combining.
I might be. This
two
was a
things.
while ago, but how?
Yeah, okay. So I've talked a lot about stream. It's very funny. It's kind of like a meme. I talked about a shroom trip I had where it became very dark at the end of the trip, because if everyone's ever been on shrooms or any psychedelic, as you come off of it, oftentimes you can start to go to a dark place because you're literally coming off of a high and you don't realize what's happening. So as I was coming off of shrooms, I had this kind of very negative internal visualization. I didn't see anything. I didn't hallucinate this. That was this idea that all of reality existed in a single room. And in that single room, there was just it was a bare room. And there's just 6 people in a circle sitting in that room. And those 6 people are literally just all that exists. And that's all God is. It's just 6 people sitting in a room. And one person has to be aware that life is a lie, and that life is just this delusion God creates in order for God to not feel alone. So you're kind of I think you're
forgot about the
combining
whole 6
that drug
people in the
trip with
room
just my
thing.
general idea of God, which is that yes, God, that all reality is God experiencing all various forms of reality.
Yes.
So every person is God experiencing that person's role in life and that experience in life. But I don't generally conceptualize God as being alone, because I think you can only feel loneliness. Like, okay, humans can only conceptualize things by what they're not, right? You only know what hot is because you know what cold is. You only know what loneliness is because you know what it's like to be with someone.
I don't
So if
know
you're
if
some sort
that's
of perfect,
true.
infinite being, you wouldn't experience loneliness, because that's like a concept that an infinite being couldn't experience loneliness, because it's literally an infinite being can't be lonely, right? It's the opposite of being infinite.
Yeah, but I guess I don't know. I just when I think of it that way, I throw away every single note whenever anything that's involving God or anything existential like that. I just throw away every single preconceived notion of everything I know. So in other words,
I mean, of course, right? Of course, that's the
Yeah.
problem. Is okay if you're talking. It's like we're fish in the water, right? And we've never experienced what it's like to not be in water, and we're trying to visualize life on land. And it's like, well, the rules could be so different. You have no way of even talking about it.
dude, I want tacos too. Maybe God wants
Tacos are
tacos.
delicious.
There you go.
I'm starving. It sounds like we're wrapping up now.
I'm hungry
anyway,
too.
so.
Let's wrap this up. This to my left is Adam Friended. Sitch's dad, as far as I'm aware. No, I'm just kidding. This is Sitch.
My father.
And they do streams every Sunday. I'm assuming a lot of you are actually hear from them. They do streams every Sunday. And maybe we'll hang out more on stream at some point. We have in the past, actually, a while ago.
Yeah.
You were on our stream.
Yeah, we reacted
one
to
of our
Candace
early
Owens for 3 hours.
You remember? I couldn't remember what it was because we're up to like 58 episodes, I think.
You never forget
No,
Candace Owens.
we're in the 90s. We talk about, we're like 80 something.
Are we? Oh,
yeah.
I mean, we're in the 80s, 90s. Great.
So check them out. PSA Sitch, Adam Friended on YouTube, of course. All right, guys. Thank you. It's been a great conversation. I enjoyed this a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
All right. Later, guys.
Bye-bye.